a special panel. I think as long as they maintain that position, you're not going to see much breakage.
This is the case in Delphos, Kansas. I got
because a number of
involved.
things
This
said
is
by
one
senior
of Ted's
administration
cases.
officials. I think one of the reasons they rolled Mike
Ronnie
Pence out
Johnson,
this
age
morning
16,
was
was
because
pushing
he's
his
the
car
president was
evening,
White
looks
House
up, there's the
last night. I
sausage
told you
thing
actually
over
talked
the
about this
ground
earlier
there.
week. The Comey testimony last week, then the Clapper Yates testimony on Capitol Hill. He
His
hears
dog
Russia,
is
Russia,
too.
Russia, continuing
this thing
expanded
takes off.
long-term investigations.
He
and he's
dashes in
mad
the
about
house,
it.
tells
Now, how
his
does that
folks, they
get you
go
fired?
out, they
The guy
see it
leading the
leave, they
investigation?
call the
That's a different
sheriff.
question.
Next day he
But he
comes
was
out,
very
checks
hot. The
for
vice president,
radiation.
in
That's
answer
all
to
everybody
questions from
worries
Illinois on
about.
Capitol Hill, here's one of the things
Wasn't
the vice president
radioactive.
said.
As you know,
Ted sent
very
me samples
clearly,
of the soil
it has been stated
from the
repeatedly
ring that
and
was
the president has
affected.
been told. He's not
It's
under
on the right,
investigation.
and from
As
nearby
former
soil
Director
on the
Clapper
left.
of the Department
You'll
of
notice
the
that sophisticated
Director
soil
of National
retention
Intelligence
device there.
there is no evidence.
I had somebody who said he wasn't going to believe anything I said because of that lousy paper.
Our campaign and
When I was at the University of Chicago, there was a Nobel Prize-winning
That's
physics
misleading.
experiment which
It's
they used
one
to
of a number of
copy.
statements from the White House that is misleading. Director Clapper said the other day that when he said that at
If they
the
can use a coffee can, I can
hearing,
use a
he was
paper.
not aware of the FBI counterintelligence investigation.
This is the case in Delphos, Kansas. I got involved. This is one of Ted's cases. Ronnie Johnson, age 16, was pushing his lunch evening, looks up, there's the sausage thing over the ground there. Famous video already, no case, paralyzed, the dog got a teeth. And then this thing takes off. He dashes in the house, tells his folks, they go out, they see it leave. They call the sheriff for two of them. Next day he comes out, checks for radiation. That's all everybody worries about. It wasn't radioactive. They were coming to town. Told me where they were. They sent me samples of the soil from the ring that was affected. He had dinner to get. Already died less than 6 months. It's on the right. And with the nearby soil on the left. You'll notice that sophisticated soil retention device that he's used. I had somebody who said he wasn't going to believe anything I said because of that lousy paper. When I was at the University of Chicago, there was a Nobel Prize-winning physics experiment which they used to If they can use a coffee can, I can use a paper. Need to be funded with this crime. This is the case in Delphos, Kansas. I got involved. This is one of Ted's cases. Ronnie Johnson, age 16, was pushing his lunch evening, looks up, there's the sausage thing over the ground there. Famous video already, no case, paralyzed, the dog got a teeth. And then this thing takes off. He dashes in the house, tells his folks, they go out, they see it leave. They call the sheriff for two of them. Next day he comes out, checks for radiation. That's all everybody worries about. He finds it. It wasn't radioactive. They were coming to town. Told me where they were. They sent me samples of the soil from the ring that was affected. He had dinner to get. Already died less than 6 months. It's on the right. And with the nearby soil on the left. You'll notice that sophisticated soil retention device that he's used. I had somebody who said he wasn't going to believe anything I said because of that lousy paper. When I was Prize-winning physics experiment which they If they can use a coffee can, I can use a paper. Need to be funded with this crime. This is the case in Delphos, Kansas. I got involved. This is one of Ted's cases. Ronnie Johnson, age 16, was pushing his lunch evening, looks up, there's the sausage thing over the ground there. Famous video already, no case, paralyzed, the dog got a teeth. And then this thing takes off. He dashes in the house, tells his folks, they go out, they see it leave. They call the sheriff for two of them. Next day he comes out, checks for radiation. That's all everybody worries about. He finds it. It wasn't radioactive. They were coming to town. They sent me samples of the soil from the ring that was affected. He had dinner to get. Already died less than 6 months. It's on the right. And with the nearby soil on the left. You'll notice that sophisticated soil retention device that he's used. I had somebody who said he wasn't going to believe anything I said because of that lousy paper. When I was Prize-winning physics experiment which they
This is the memo here, essentially called from op-ed pieces written by former Attorney Generals and former Assistant Attorney Generals criticizing Jim Comey. This is not a new research project. And he makes the case, he doesn't recommend firing of the and he said you can make a case to fire
really
him.
don't know
And then
what
Jeff
went on
Sessions,
in
the
Dr.
Attorney General,
Simon's
sends a
head
letter
when
saying,
he's listening
look at
to
what my
this.
deputy says, I think you should fire Mr. President. And then Donald Trump
But
fires
he
him.
did
In this
something
letter
very
firing him,
sensible.
it makes no
He
mention
asked
of
if
the
you could
Hillary
remember
Clinton
what it
email
looked like.
investigation, but it
She said
does
yes.
note, just
He gives her
because,
a
I
post-it
guess,
note
while I greatly
expressed,
appreciate
if
you
and
informing
only
me
if
on
she
3
could
separate
remember
occasions
accurately,
that
please
I am not under
later on.
investigation, I nevertheless
She goes
concur
home.
with the
She
judgment of the Department
She
of
brings
Justice.
it in, it's in
not
the book.
able to effectively lead
The Interrupted Journey by John Fuller.
Russia is very much
And,
on the president's mind. Listen to
You know,
Karen
base
Powell.
stars, occasional trade routes. Who knows what this means?
This had nothing to do with Russia.
Well,
as much
a
as
brilliant
somebody
woman
wants to
named
get
Marjorie
$50
Fish
every
did
time
something
the
nobody
word
else had ever
sounds
done.
on TV.
She built a
It
bunch
has nothing
of,
to do with Russia.
here's
It has
Marjorie.
everything to do with
You can see how long ago the
whether current
picture is taken.
FBI
Notice
director
my
has
beard
the
there.
president's confidence and
A
can
little darker.
faithfully
And she was a sculptor. She made the model of what the alien looked like from Betty's description.
She read the letter from the boss.
And
It's hard to
she
make
went and
cases like
visited
this with
Betty.
Russia. When you talk to
She was a
the
school
president
teacher in
and
Ohio.
others involved in this
Betty lived in New
decision,
Hampshire.
how he has been about
Went and visited her, got more information. She wound up building more than 20 three-dimensional models.
And you're going to make the case to the American people this was the right thing to do. You better make a good, factual, credible case.
Looking like this. Her biggest one had 256 stars in it, each in its proper three-dimensional location. That's a lot of numbers to come copy out of the star catalog that the library at Ohio State University wouldn't let her take the catalogs out, the star catalogs. She had to copy out all these numbers. Fish line.
What we heard in the testimony earlier this week was that the acting attorney
Built a
general went to the
total
White
20 of
House and
these.
told that Michael Flynn was
The idea was to walk around the
The president
model
waited 18 days and only
to see
after
if she
that
could
publicly
find any
disclosed
pattern
the
that
finding.
matched it.
What we also heard in the testimony earlier this week is Jim Clapper, the former
Let me
director
put-
of National Intelligence, said he couldn't answer a question about Trump's Russia business interests because that was part of the investigation. So I'm sorry to Sarah Huckabee Sanders. We actually learned a lot of new things in that. Now, we don't know where they're going. We don't know the conclusions. But there's a lot of stuff, the credible things that are being investigated, and for her to go on national television and say there's nothing there, go away, there's nothing to see.
Well, this is the sort of conundrum that we keep seeing the White House communication shop. Jeff was talking about them in over and over again. They keep trying to bring reality in line with Donald Trump's tweets, as opposed to dealing with the reality that has been laid out in testimony and elsewhere. Don't forget too, we found out this week that President Obama had specifically warned incoming President Trump against hiring Flynn. Again, all of these things seem to, they're the context that all of this is happening in.
As I said, we'll continue the conversation. The hour had a lot to unpack. Up next, why now? Even some would say Comey's firing was a good thing. Acknowledge the timing. Pretty bad.
Dear Predictable, there's no other way to say this. It's over. I found a permanent escape from monotony. Together we are perfectly balanced. Our senses awake. Our hearts racing as one. I know this is sudden, but they say if you love something, set it free. See you around, Julia.
Attention Medicare beneficiaries. Many people with Medicare may be able to get extra benefits and don't even know they're available. You may be able to get dental, vision, hearing, and prescription drug coverage included in your plan. The Medicare Coverage Helpline is accepting calls to see if you're eligible to enroll now. You may be able to get extra benefits including dental, vision, and prescription drug coverage.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jason Buchwald. Making sure you go to the doctor and taking all your medications as prescribed can help protect your health. To make it easier, you may now be able to enroll in a Medicare Advantage plan that includes coverage for dental, vision, and prescription drugs. Help protect your health by choosing the right plan for you and get all the benefits you deserve.
Call to see if you may be
My
able to get
conclusion's
extra
right up
benefits
front, so
including
you know
dental,
where I'm
vision,
coming
and
from,
prescription
besides Linden,
coverage.
New Jersey, a
Don't
long
delay.
time
Call to see if
ago.
you're eligible to enroll and may be able to get
I live in
extra
Fredericton,
benefits.
New Brunswick,
Call
now for 35 years.
800-779-8200. That's 800-779-8200.
First, the evidence is overwhelming. Planet Earth is being visited by intelligently controlled extraterrestrial spacecraft. In other words, some, underline 18 times, some UFOs are alien spacecraft. Most are not. I don't care about that. Second, we're the subject of flying saucers. And I prefer flying saucers to UFOs because all flying saucers are UFOs. Very few UFOs are flying saucers. All great-grandfathers are men. not all men are great-grandfathers. I happen to be one, incidentally. So I'm the great-grandfather of ufology.
Healthy and get in the best shape of your life. Introducing
The second conclusion is that we're dealing with a cosmic Watergate. In other words, some few people in government know what's going on. Not many. You don't keep secrets by telling everybody. That's not how. I've worked under security for 14 years in the States. And there are a lot of secrets. You don't get access to all of them. We'll mention a few as we go along. Anybody who works for the NSA in the past year? Well, if they don't know the public, I shouldn't even ask the question. No such agency, NSA, you know. Oh, there's somebody back there. Okay. Waved a hand anyway. The third conclusion is that there are no good arguments against the first two conclusions. And the fourth is we're dealing with the biggest story of the millennium. Visits to planet Earth by alien spacecraft, successul cover-up of the best data body in the wreckage since at least 1947, let's say. We don't know how far back the proof goes. Okay, now, question of evidence. This is the largest study ever done for the United States Air Force. Project Blue Book Special Report 14, the work done at Battelle Memorial Institute in Columbus, Ohio. The report wasn't distributed at the time, 1955. Instead, a press release was put out in which the Secretary of the Air Force lied. I know it's hard to believe, but a government official lying? It happened. And why do I say that? On the basis, this is what he said in the press release. I'm not making this up. On the basis of this study, we believe that no objects such as those popularly described as flying saucers have overflown the United States. I feel certain that even the unknown 3% could have been explained as conventional phenomena or illusions if more complete observational data had been obtained. Yeah, the only trouble with that is that it's total nonsense. Why do I say that? Here's the breakdown of the cases. You'll notice the bottom category, the unknowns. They're the only ones we're interested in. 21.5%. Nobody I know ever rounded off 3 as 21.5. You'll notice the next to the last category, insufficient information. That was the other part of what he said. If more complete observational data had been available, by definition, if there wasn't enough information, it was not listed as an unknown. I'll give this report for getting me started to be heavily involved in ufology. I had found it at the University of California, Berkeley Library. I'd read 10 books before this. None of them had mentioned it. So it came as quite a surprise. And then, because I'm a data hound, I looked through the report and I look at what the Secretary of the Air Force said, and I said, I don't like being lied to by an official at that level. That pushed me to join APRO and NICAP, the two big old organizations, no longer around. I'm still around, but they're not. And it was, you know, dinner table conversation, not dinner table, but work lunch table at the office with other scientists. And I joined those organizations, and I finally decided I wanted to go public. Grant mentioned Frank Edwards. I had moved to Indianapolis. I was on a 3 years here, 3 years there, 3 years someplace else. There's no security in being a nuclear physicist, I'll tell you that. I got to know Frank, and just before I moved to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to work for Westinghouse Astronuclear after yet another program had been canceled. I think I've set a record for working on canceled government-sponsored R&D programs. Frank gave me a copy of his book. I called him and said, Frank, you know everybody, which he did, and here I am in Pittsburgh. Give me some names of people. I want to go public. He gave me a bunch of names. I get a kick out of one was the director of a great show called Contact, of all things, on KDKA Pittsburgh, one of the big stations in the country. talk show. I thought being a Westinghouse nuclear physicist, I'd be welcomed on the show because Pittsburgh is very much a Westinghouse town. And it was, don't call us, we'll call you. Less than a month later, they called me at 6:30. Could I do the 7 o'clock show, please? Somebody had canceled. And I've often wondered, how many guys did they call before they finally found somebody? I lived near the station, so I went on. Somebody at work heard me. That's how I did my first lecture, in somebody's living room. I went on from there to do the program and several other lectures. Happened to ride to work one of 2 days with somebody whose husband was the dean at Carnegie University, Carnegie Tech. I said, I'd like to speak there. Have you talked to the dean? No, I talked to Dr. So-and-so. He wasn't interested. Why don't you talk to the dean, Stan? He's my husband. He heard you on the radio. I called. We booked the talk. He asked me how much that I want. I knew it was a daytime talk. I'd have to take time off work. So I said, how about $100? I figured he'd knock me down to 50. He bought me for $100. Then he told me what he was paying the other speakers in the series, $1,200, $1,500, $1,700. The talk went very well. He wrote the agent through whom he had booked the other speakers, and they booked me at the Engineering Society of Detroit. Now, I drive Japanese cars pretty much, but I still respect the members of the Engineering Society of Detroit. $300 in expenses. They were sold out 3 weeks in advance for 1,008 people for dinner and a talk. And there wasn't one negative question. Now, I couldn't help but respond to that. So that got me rolling. I was a ufologist. People say, why'd you decide to leave industry? I didn't decide. I had a family to support. So then it was, let's get the facts, let's get the data, let's get the lectures, let's keep on. People say, when are you going to retire? I say, why should I retire? I like my boss. That's me. They also did a quality evaluation here. Quality is important. You'll notice that 35% of the best cases could not be explained. Only 18% of the poor ones. And yet you will get people saying, well, Dr. Donald Menzel said, all witnesses, sightings that can't be explained, are poor observers. Nonsense. Plain, pure nonsense. Here's 2 other sources of information for people who say there isn't any data. The UFO evidence on the left put out by NICAP, data on thousands of cases, 18% couldn't be explained. On the right, one everybody should be interested in, Symposium on UFOs. The Congress of the United States, Committee on Science and Astronautics, held hearings. 6 scientists testified in person, 6 more of us in writing only. I was one of the latter group of 6. I was the only one of the 12 who didn't have a PhD. And I'm the only one who's still alive, too, because I was the youngest guy, I think. The best paper by Dr. James E. McConnell, a professor of physics, University of Arizona, talked to over 500 witnesses. 41 of the best cases are in this report. Next time somebody tells you, and I have a few copies at my table, that there aren't any good cases, tell them to look at Jim's work. Fine investigator. And then the University of Colorado study, and everybody says, well, didn't they show there was nothing to flying saucers? Well, Dr. Condon claimed that. But if you look at the report and you listen to the findings of a special UFO subcommittee of the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, and I was not a member of the committee, they wouldn't let me on it because even though I'm a member of the AIA, I had reached a conclusion after 11 years of study. That's not surprising, is it? Anyway, they found that any phenomena with 30% of the cases investigated that couldn't be explained is certainly worthy of further investigation. 30%. What percentage of isotopes are fissionable? 1%. Can we build atomic bombs and nuclear reactors? Of course. Who cares about the other 99%? So even the Condon report, 965 pages. And I was given my first copy by KDKA Pittsburgh, the station on which I had done my first radio show. There's Dr. J. Allen Hynek's book. He was the Air Force scientific consultant for 21 years. He lists 70 cases that couldn't be explained. Very conservative man, the same age as my father. Used to chide him about that a little bit. But at least he had the sense to come out and say, hey, there's something worth studying here. You set up the Center for UFO Studies. Funny how the astronomers never talk about Dr. Hynek's book. Kind of interesting.
Welcome to the Science of Magic, a program combining the science and magic of today's leading topics to co-create new solutions and promote evolutionary thinking. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Today we'll be exploring scalar energy. Matter is energy. Energy is light. We are all light beings. Albert Einstein. For as long as there's been recorded history, there are reports of a magical light that builds and destroys, disassembles and reassembles. From Jesus' laying on of hands and the psychic surgery of shaman, to the levitation and bilocation of the Tibetan monks, those that master this light have done seemingly miraculous things. What is this invisible light? How does one master it? What all can it do? Does it really exist? Could it possibly be the way out of this environmental mess we've made? The key to our future? Our guest this episode may have some surprising answers to these very questions. With us to explore the science of the topic is Tom Palladino, a scalar energy researcher with 25-plus years experience in helping people with pathogenic infection. His research with scalar energy was inspired by Nikola Tesla and other scientists who alluded to the existence of an energy beyond the electromagnetic spectrum. Tom pursued independent study in order to better understand and harness scalar energy. He's developed a technique he believes will transmute pathogens quickly and painlessly. His website, selfhealgo.com. Tom, thank you so much for joining us on the Science of Magic.
Thank you, Gwilda, for the invite.
What can you tell us about this magical energy?
Well, scalar energy is a different spectrum. It's not electricity, it's not magnetism. Scalar energy originates from the sun, the stars of the universe, so it's a fundamental force in nature. But again, it's nothing like that of electricity. And what I've discovered that scalar energy is essentially the instructions for the universe, and I'll get into that as we expand our conversation. The instructions of the universe. It's quite fascinating.
You know, I recently saw a diagram of scalar energy, and instead of being a wave format like you see in light and sound, it's actually a double helix. Mm-hmm. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, that's one of the unique properties of scalar energy. Again, it is not electricity. Scalar energy is, as you described, a double helix. Imagine two corkscrews intertwined. Well, that is a scalar emanation, a scalar wave, if you will. And again, it's quite different than that of electricity. I believe that all energy originates as scalar energy, and then scalar energy will degrade, will convert into electricity and magnetism. That's one of the principles that I've discovered.
So it's like a higher range or a more unified range of the same thing.
That's correct. That's correct. If you will, electricity is a derivative of scalar energy.
Okay. So like with electricity, you see like lightning. You see the ground builds a charge, the sky builds a charge, they come together and you have lightning. I understand scalar energy is not polarized like that.
Well, it depends on how you define terms. I could say that scalar energy does have a polarity, that is, an in-phase polarity would serve to represent or create matter, whereas an out-of-phase polarity would serve to negate molecular bonds, would serve to bring matter to a state of chaos. So for this discussion, let's say that scalar energy does have a polarity. In phase will assemble matter, out of phase will disassemble matter.
So out of phase, is that parity particle thing where you get an equal but opposite, a mirror image, and they cancel each other out?
Yes, precisely, correct.
So how do you build things? I get to take it apart, but how do you build them?
Sure. Again, scalar energy has a in-phase polarity, and in so doing, that serves as instructions for matter to assemble. Again, going back to my earlier discussion and comment, scalar energy serves as the instructions for the universe, so we can instruct atomic forms, molecular forms to indeed assemble and to bind. It again is quite fascinating what we can do with scalar energy.
So what do you have to have present for that to work? The constituent parts?
That's correct. You need the building block parts. You need the elements of the periodic table. And essentially that's all you need. And from there you can arrange and rearrange matter. It's fascinating.
So our bodies are made of the elements water, air, earth, fire, et cetera, et cetera. So they're already present in our body. It's just a matter of how you arrange them. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct. I can assemble nutrients inside the body, vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and I do that all by virtue of the fact that everybody has elements in the body. As you mentioned, phosphorus, nitrogen, oxygen, hydrogen. I simply rearrange those elements into molecular forms, if you will, of antioxidants and vitamins.
So that would be more user-friendly because it's already in the body and aligned with the body. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's the perfection of scalar energy. There's no wasted motion. It's perfection.
Amazing. We're going to have to take a commercial break. It's time for that quick break. Tom and I will return to our discussion shortly, so don't go away. For more information on all we offer, visit us at thescienceofmagic.net.
Obliterated an island. This kind of thing that Grant was talking about. The Russians exploded one a few years later. 57 million tons of TNT energy release. I worked on a study of fusion propulsion for deep space travel in 1962. You can kick particles out the back end of a rocket. There was an Air Force study, incidentally. The particles will have 10 million times as much energy per particle as you can get in a dumb old chemical rocket. So when somebody tells you, you can't get here from there, you might say, you mean on a bicycle? Stupid thing to say. So let's clear up a few points. The real science says, if you want to go to the stars, we know how to go. You just got to put up the dough. All the programs that are, like going to the moon cost $20 billion. I'm not saying you can go down to Walmart and order one. Takes a lot of work, a lot of people. But we're accustomed to spending lots of money. In the United States, for example, the world military budget this year is a mere $1 trillion. Trillion.
Jamaica is well known for its friendly people, rich culture, and white sand beaches. But there's a dark side to her history as well, reaching back hundreds of years to a time of brutal slavery and mystic spiritualism. One ghostly reminder of this acres in 2000.
Welcome to The Science of Magic, a program combining the science and magic of today's leading topics to co-create new solutions and promote evolutionary thinking. I'm your host,
Months into their marriage.
Today we'll be exploring scalar energy. Matter is energy. Energy is light. We are all light beings. Albert Einstein. For as long as there's been recorded history, there are reports of a magical light that builds and destroys, disassembles and reassembles. From Jesus' laying on of hands and the psychic surgery of shaman, to the levitation and bilocation of the Tibetan monks, those that master this light have done seemingly miraculous things. What is this invisible light? How does one master it? What all can it do? Does it really exist? Could it possibly be the way out of this environmental mess we've made? The key to our future? Our guest this episode may have some surprising answers to these very questions. With us to explore the science of the topic is Tom Palladino, a scalar energy researcher with 25 plus years experience in helping people with pathogenic infection. His research with scalar energy was inspired by Nikola Tesla and other scientists who alluded to the existence of an energy beyond the electromagnetic spectrum. Tom pursued independent study in order to better understand and harness scalar energy. He's developed a technique he believes will transmute pathogens quickly and painlessly. His website, selfhealgo.com. Tom, thank you so much for joining us on The Science of Magic.
Thank you, Gwilda, for the invite.
What can you tell us about this magical energy?
Well, scalar energy is a different spectrum. It's not electricity, it's not magnetism. Scalar energy originates from the sun, the stars of the universe, so it's a fundamental force in nature. But again, it's nothing like that of electricity. And what I've discovered that scalar energy is essentially the instructions for the universe, and I'll get into that as we expand our conversation. The instructions of the universe. It's quite fascinating.
You know, I recently saw a diagram of scalar energy, and instead of being a wave format like you see in light and sound, it's actually a double helix. Mm-hmm. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, that's one of the unique properties of scalar energy. Again, it is not electricity. Scalar energy is, as you described, a double helix. Imagine two corkscrews intertwined. Well, that is a scalar emanation, a scalar wave, if you will. And again, it's quite different than that of electricity. I believe that all energy originates as scalar energy, and then scalar energy will degrade, will convert into electricity and magnetism. That's one of the principles that I've discovered.
So it's like a higher range or a more unified range of the same thing.
That's correct. That's correct. If you will, electricity is a derivative of scalar energy.
Okay. So like with electricity, you see like lightning. You see the ground builds a charge, the sky builds a charge, they come together and you have lightning. I understand scalar energy is not polarized like that.
Well, it depends on how you define terms. I could say that scalar energy does have a polarity, that is, an in-phase polarity would serve to represent or create matter, whereas an out-of-phase polarity would serve to negate molecular bonds, would serve to bring matter to a state of chaos. So for this discussion, let's say that scalar energy does have a polarity. In phase will assemble matter, out of phase will disassemble matter.
So out of phase, is that parity particle thing where you get an equal but opposite, a mirror image, and they cancel each other out?
Yes, precisely. Correct.
So how do you build things? I get to take it apart, but how do you build them?
Sure. Again, scalar energy has a in-phase polarity, and in so doing, that serves as instructions for matter to assemble. Again, going back to my earlier discussion and comment, scalar energy serves as the instructions for the universe, so we can instruct atomic forms, molecular forms to indeed assemble and to bind. It again is quite fascinating what we can do with scalar energy.
So what do you have to have present for that to work? The constituent parts?
That's correct. You need the building block parts. You need the elements of the periodic table. And essentially that's all you need. And from there you can arrange and rearrange matter. Fascinating.
So our bodies are made of the elements water, air, earth, fire, et cetera, et cetera. So they're already present in our body. It's just a matter of how you arrange them. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct. I can assemble nutrients inside the body, vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and I do that all by virtue of the fact that everybody has elements in the body. As you mentioned, phosphorus, nitrogen, oxygen, hydrogen. I simply rearrange those elements into molecular forms, if you will, of antioxidants and vitamins.
So that would be more user-friendly because it's already in the body and aligned with the body. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's the perfection of scalar energy. There's no wasted motion. It's perfection.
Amazing. We're going to have to take a commercial break. It's time for that quick break. Tom and I will return to our discussion shortly, so don't go away. For more information on all we offer, visit us at thescienceofmagic.net.
Background that is completely many other things. But in 1979, I found the first photo book of the Meyer case in a bookstore in Los Angeles, and I saw that. I looked, and it was authentic. In my opinion, I've never changed my mind in the past almost 36 years, but I've had a lot more to go on in terms of evidence examination, research, investigation, 14 trips to Switzerland, meeting with Meyer every time, filming him, interviewing him, 6, 7 films that I've done totally since 1987 on this. So my experience is that I have gone in, and I've also troubled myself to have met with the original investigators, the late Wendell Stevens, Britt and Lee Elders. I've shared my stage with the world-class physicist David Froning, who came forward to speak up and say this is authentic. You know, I'm working with scientists who regard this as very authentic. We have a NASA aerospace engineer just come forward, a man who just retired from orbital space systems down in the Tucson area. Both those guys, by the way, are willing to share my stage and say, hey, this is the real deal. And the reason, I mean, I'm jumping fast forward through how did I get involved with this, because what's involved now is extremely important. It pertains, as it all
Welcome to the X Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell, and the X Zone is a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Our website, www.xzonetv.com, and on all social media sites, X Zone Radio TV. And of course, you can listen to the X Zone 724, 365 at www.xzoneradiotv.com. Tonight, here in the X Zone, a gentleman I've had the pleasure of knowing for many years now. In fact, he was one of the very first guests on the X Zone when we started way back when. His name is Michael Horn. Michael's story is very compelling. Michael has, well, you know what? I'm going to let Michael tell you his story and how he became to be part of this very fascinating world of ufology. Joining me now from Flagstaff, Arizona via Skype is Michael Horn. And Michael, welcome back to the X Zone.
Hi, Rob. Thanks for having me back on and for being on your TV show for the first time as well.
It's our pleasure, Michael. Michael, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'll give it to you in terms of the Meyer case. I mean, I have a background that is completely many other things. But in 1979, I found the first photo book of the Meyer case in a bookstore in Los Angeles. And I saw that, I looked, and it was authentic. In my opinion, I've never changed my mind in the past almost 36 years. But I've had a lot more to go on in terms of evidence examination, research, investigation, 14 trips to Switzerland, meeting with Meyer every time, filming him, interviewing him, 6, 7 films that I've done totally since 1987 on this. So my experience is that I have gone in, and I've also troubled myself to have met with the original investigators, the late Wendell Stevens, Britt and Lee Elders. I've shared my stage with the world-class physicist David Froning, who came forward to speak up and say this is authentic. You know, I'm working with scientists who regard this as very authentic. We have a NASA aerospace engineer just come forward, a man who just retired from orbital space systems down in the Tucson area. Both those guys, by the way, are willing to share my stage and say, hey, this is the real deal. And the reason, I mean, I'm jumping fast forward through how did I get involved with this, because what's involved now is extremely important. It pertains, as it always has, to our very threatened future survival. So any and everything that I do now on the Meyer case is basically to try to bring awareness of it to people who can then determine the truth for themselves.
Tell me Billy Meyer's story and why you have stayed on this story and worked so hard at proving to people, and there's many skeptics out there, Michael. You're no stranger to skepticism and how devastating the internet and the skepticism and the lack of mentality of certain skeptics are these days. Billy Meyer, what is his story and why do you Michael Horn believe in his story so much?
Well, I'll jump only to say, there's things, I don't claim to believe anything. I know certain things, and some things I don't know, including in the Meyer case,
Okay.
of course. Let's put it this way. Meyer himself claims that as a 5-year-old boy in 1942, he was contacted for the first time by an extraterrestrial man named Svath, a Pleiadian, a.k.a. Pleiadians. There are no Pleiadians, but that's another story. And that this began his lifelong contacts with the Pleiadian people and other races, where he was mentored, tutored, taught by these people and taught them as well.
Welcome to another edition of the X Zone. My name is Rob McConnell, and I'm your host and your guide as together we cross the time.
Conversational fast for real life situations. Try Babbel.com for free today. My name's Ron and I lost 80 pounds on nutrition. Men, pay attention. Have a big belly, want to raise your test.
Space continuum to this place that I call the X Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And joining me this hour from Mission Hills in California is Jose Escamilla. Anyone within the UFO community, anyone who's ever looked at UFOs, anyone who's ever had an interest in UFOs knows Jose Escamilla. I first met Jose years ago during the X Zone radio show when we were talking about the Roswell rods. Over the years, Jose and I have kept in communication. He's done up to date 12 documentaries. He's working on his newest venture. But let's go to Jose in Mission Hills, California. Jose joins us by Skype. And Jose, welcome to the X Zone again.
Well, hello there, Rob. It's good to talk to you again.
Good talking to you too, my friend. For those people in the X Zone TV audience who have never heard of you or who aren't too sure who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, first of all, I was raised in Roswell, New Mexico. I'm from Roswell, the epicenter of UFOs.
Right.
Where the Roswell crash happened. And I got known in this area because I filmed 16 minutes on March 5th, 1994, 16 minutes of broad daylight UFO activity. And it turned out that the activity continued, daily basis there. On March 19th, I was filming for UFOs, and there were these things that were flying about that looked like snakes, snakes flying in the air. And as we came to find out, we named them rods because they look like this bacteria that exist in a microscopic area that are called rods. Right? So these things, we don't know what they are. They still exist. They're being filmed all over the world. And it's been a phenomenon that's amazing. They are so fast. You can see them with the naked eye, but they are so fast they are hardly detectable. But they are there.
I remember one of the video clips you sent me many years ago showed a tank firing off a round, and the Roswell rod was faster than the round exiting the tank's cannon. You also sent me video of the Roswell rods in a cave, and it is truly amazing. And in your opinion, after investigating these rods, these phenomenon for so many years, are these rods part of the UFO phenomenon?
They are. And they are an unidentified flying object. They are a UFO, a type of UFO. However, these things, they appear to be living entities of some kind. They appear to be some kind of an organism. However, we have footage of them in space, coming in and out of Earth from shuttle footage.
Right.
And recently we got footage of rods on Mars.
Rods on Mars.
Rods on Mars. And I don't make this stuff up, Rob.
No, I know you. I've known you long enough to know that you don't.
Yeah, I always present the evidence as it presents itself. And for many, many years, I've had network television shows such as Monster Quest and NBC that have tried to debunk me and saying I'm just faking the stuff. They're just insects being filmed by cameras and creating anomalies and types, this type of thing.
Right.
But recently, between last year and now, because of the advent of the GoPro cameras, and also of the high-speed cameras, the Red Cam, which is the best, the highest resolution camera in the world, we now have rod footage shot at 24p, which means those are 24 true frames. There's no interlacing that would cause any kind of artifact. And high speed, 200 to 2,000 frames per second.
Wow.
You can stop a bullet with this camera, okay?
Right.
We have broad daylight footage of two rods, one filmed in the UK during a Red Bull, is that the kind of drink it is?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and there's a skin suit jumper coming up of a mountain, and he's coming down at 140 miles an hour, being filmed at 2,000 frames per second, and he's barely moving. I mean, he's just going so slow, coming towards the camera, and then a rod flies through the scene fast.
Wow.
And when you go frame by frame, it is a rod, like I've been showing you and people all over the world. And it's not a bird. Filming at 24p and 2,000 frames per second, it eliminates all of the other anomalous things that, you could explain it away. And the rod looks exactly like it looks. I mean, it's a rod. We also have, on the Red Cam, at 4K resolution, which is like IMAX, okay? IMAX resolution, a rod that flies through the scene, and it's at 200 frames per second. When you go see that, it's a true rod. It's not a bird. If it was a bird, you'd see its wings and beak and all that. And we now have that footage, man, and it's amazing. And I'm coming out with a new movie.
All right, let's talk about your new movie when we come back from this break. Exxon Nation, Jose Escamilla is our very special guest. www.tblnfilms.com. Rods on Mars. Fascinating. We'll be back on the other side of this break as we continue here in the X Zone with yours truly, Rob McConnell. We'll be back. Don't go away. Here we are in the year 2015. We haven't put a human being, a living being, on Mars. We're just contemplating the very first voyages, manned voyages to that planet as we speak. And yet, the Roswell rods that Jose Escamilla filmed many years ago in the 90s, and we talked about here several times in the X Zone, have been filmed on Mars. Joining me now from Mission Hills, California via Skype is Jose Escamilla. And Jose, what was it like when you saw that your rods were actually on Mars?
I was happy because we've known that they have the ability to traverse in outer space, okay, from the shuttle footage and the ISS footage. We also have full color ISS footage of rods coming in and out of Earth, and they're huge. And you have to realize that on the shuttle and the ISS, those are traveling at 18,000 miles per hour.
Right.
That's what they're orbiting at. And these rods are zipping by super fast, much faster, and they're going in different trajectories. So I was excited about that. Getting this Mars footage is really phenomenal because now we know that this thing, whatever it is, or if it's a living entity or whatever it is on Mars. And this is a huge rod that flies in. You can see it. There's actually 2 or 3 shots we have of rods on Mars, but there's this one particular one, and you're going to have the footage. It shows it going into either the landscape or on the other side of the horizon of this Mars footage. It's just an amazing thing.
What have scientists said about the rods? How do they describe what you're presenting them on video? You know, you can't fake video coming from Mars. They can't accuse you of faking this video.
Exactly.
You know, so what does the scientific community say when you have these extraterrestrial entities that you here on this planet have in the sky, going into the water, going in and out of outer space, and now on a totally different planet in another part of our solar system? What do they say?
They don't say anything, actually. Back in the 90s, I contacted NASA. I contacted people at the Denver Museum of Natural History and people here at the LA, Los Angeles Museum of Natural History. And I took the footage of the cave and the underwater footage that we have of rods, which is spectacular within itself. And we took it to marine biologists and marine zoologists, and they had no idea. They said, there could be a specimen in some jar at some laboratory in the world named as an unknown plankton.
Unknown plankton.
Unknown jelly plankton. It could be. They have millions of specimens underwater that are totally unnamed. And the lady told me that, look, if a marine biologist sees this footage in Ireland or in Iceland or wherever it might be located, if they see it, they might recognize it and pull out a specimen. And that would be amazing, because these things have the ability to enter and come out of the oceans. So we know there's a life cycle here that these have underwater. And I recently last year I got footage, amazing footage of an underwater rod. It's right there. You're going to have all this footage. I'm sending it to you. Plus, I have scientists that have looked at rods over the years. They just don't know what they are. Their thing is, look, if we get a specimen, we'll be able to determine what its metabolism is and what it eats and what have you. But until we get a specimen, we can't really classify it as a earthly living biological creature than what we know of.
And here we just found out that scientists in Australia have found a new species of a sea dragon. And this is the first time in 150 years that they've actually discovered this species that, for all intents and purposes, has been living right under their noses. Jose, we have to go to a break soon, but I have to ask you this question. Is there a connection between Roswell rods and the creation of crop circles?
I do have footage of rods at crop circle areas. There's this lady that I'll tell you about it on the next break. But we do have footage of them. We just don't know if they create them. I mean,
Right. And is it possible? Now, this is a far stretch, but talking to you, I know I'm allowed to take this latitude. Is it possible that the rod or the staff that Moses was holding in biblical times, that was giving him the authority or the power to do all these miracles he did prior to the Egyptians allowing them to leave Egypt, could this have been part of a Roswell rod?
Yes, I don't think so, Rob, because rods are forever moving about.
Ah, okay.
And I don't think that, I know that's mentioned in the Bible of the rod and everything else, but it's not, I don't think it was.
I just thought I'd ask you, since you are the rod expert. X-Zone Nation, Jose Escamilla is my special guest. www.tblnfilms.com, and Jose and I return on the other side of this break as we continue here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't forget, you can always visit us online at xzonetv.com and listen to the X-Zone radio show 7/24/365 at www.xzoneradiotv.com. Don't go away. We'll be right back. And welcome back, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell. This is X-Zone TV, www.xzonetv.com. REL-MAR.com. My guest this hour, all the way from Mission Hills, California, originally from Roswell, New Mexico, is Jose Escamilla. His website is www.tblnfilms.com. Am I correct there, Jose?
That's right.
Jose, let's just talk about Roswell for a second, since you're from there, and I'm sure that you yourself, as one of the leading UFO researchers, have researched this story in and out. In your opinion, based on your expertise, what happened at Roswell, New Mexico?
There were two crashes, actually. There's two locations. The ranch where the first UFO hit was brought down, and then there was another area at Pine Ridge, which is about 6 miles northeast of Roswell. There was also a UFO crash there. And in the 60s, I had a rock and roll band. I was about 15, 16 years old, and we were a pretty successful rock and roll band. I'm sending you that photo of me when I was that age. We had a band called the Ye Court Jesters, and we were touring with bands like the Turtles, the Grassroots.
Really? Wow.
Like Tina Turner, we opened for all these groups, Dick Clark Show, Paul Revere and the Raiders, Steve Alemo, all this. And we were tooling around, and we saw UFOs. I mean, we used to see UFOs in broad daylight, but, in those days, we were just rock and rolling, and messing with chicks. So it was like real crazy. But we had a major UFO encounter coming out of Carlsbad, New Mexico, where this UFO flew right over us. It flew right over us. It flew so low that I jumped up and tried to touch the bottom of it. That's how big and low it was. And I've got this in my new book. I have a new book out that's available at TBLN Films. And Roswell, I grew up talking to the Wilmots. The Wilmots were the people that were sitting on their front porch and actually saw that UFO as it zipped by over Roswell. And they saw the explosion and everything else. And the Wilmots owned a toy store there in downtown Roswell. It was called Wilmot's House of Toys. And my dad used to take me there all the time because my dad had an outdoor theater at Midway where all the ranchers would come out and see movies on the screen. We had 2 projectors. We used to rent movies from a company called Black Hawk Films. And that's where I fell in love with films, filmmaking and projectors and this kind of thing. And the Wilmots appeared on their own TV commercial that we produced. My dad showed me how to make a TV commercial. First you shoot the outside, then you go inside and pan around, and then you get the owners to stand there with their phone number on a cardboard thing, and that's what it was in those days. It was all shot in 16mm film that we developed there at Midway. So I've been into the film aspect and also the UFO aspect over Roswell. Chief Hall, who was the sheriff and the chief of police in those days, that the military said, if you say anything, you're going to wind up in the desert. Okay?
Wow.
You will never be seen again. Well, he was after me. He was wanting to put me in jail because I was a rock and roller and I was dating his daughter.
Oh, I think that had a lot to do with it.
So, that's kind of my story in Roswell. I knew about the UFO crash. My dad told me about it. Our neighbors there at Midway, there were some people that saw the crash, some people that were out there with the archaeologists. And so I knew about it. And in the town of Roswell, you'll be surprised, even though they have the Roswell Museum and everything, other people that witnessed the event or that know about it or that were at the air base, that worked there and everything else, they don't say a word, Rob. They're not, how do you say it? They're not gloating about how famous the Roswell thing is.
If that's for me, I'm not here.
Yeah, sorry about that. I forgot to But they don't talk about it, actually. Or any restaurant where there's a group of people from Roswell or ranchers or what have you having breakfast, they will not say a word.
Really?
Yeah, they're not into going in that direction. So it's an incredible place. Roswell, there are UFOs still visiting Roswell and Midway daily.
Daily?
Yeah, it's just that people are not paying attention or checking it out, not wanting to get involved. But yeah, there's a lot of activity there. And I'm going to go back there. When I do the new Roswell Rods film, which is called They Live in the Skies,
right?
I'm going back to Roswell. I'm going back to Denver where I was, where a lot of the people that were with MUFON were helping research the RODS activity. Michael Curta, for one, he was a state director of MUFON back in those days, back in the 90s. James Peters, Galen Sharp, Ty Simpson. There's a lot of people there that I'm going to be in the original. These are the original ROD men.
Right.
And ROD women. I'm the ROD man.
And they're the ROD people.
They're the RODS people, man.
So you're like Rotting Hood, and they're your merry men.
There you go.
All right, stand by. Jose Escamilla is my special guest, Exonation, TBLNfilms.com. And when we come back, more with Jose, the Roswell Rods, UFOs, and what is really on the moon. My name is Rob McConnell. This is X-Zone TV. We'll be back after this break. Jose Escamilla is my special guest of this segment of the X-Zone. We're talking about the Roswell Rods. We're talking about UFOs. We're going to be talking about what's really on the moon in a little while. But here's my question to you, the members of the scientific community. Here you have someone who has video documented proof that we are not alone, and I'm talking about the footage of the rods. They've been found in our atmosphere. They've been found all over the world. They've been found underwater, coming in and out of outer space. They've been shot from the ISS. They've been shot by the shuttle. They've even been found on Mars. Why don't you guys in the scientific world get behind Jose and find out what they really are? If they can go from Earth to Mars, wouldn't that help us in our quest for space flight, space development? Come on, guys, give it a try. Contact Jose. TBLNfilms.com. Joining me again from Mission City in California, Jose Escamilla. And Jose, first of all, always great talking to you, my friend. What is on the moon?
I found in February 2009, I found a website. I was making a scene for a film I was making called Moon Rising, and I wanted to shoot a scene of us leaving Earth and going through the atmosphere and winding up right there on the moon. So I needed a special effect moon,
right.
And I contacted guys that work on Star Trek and Star Wars, and I said, hey, where do you get those incredible realistic planets? And how much is it? They said it's all free. Go to www.mapaplanet.org. All right?
Yeah.
So I went there, and I see this gray scale shot of the moon. I click on that, it takes me to another landing page, and there's all different variations of photography of the moon. In the middle, smack dab in the middle, your viewers, listeners that go there, mapaplanet.org, they'll be able to see what I saw in 2009. There was a thing that said natural color. And I go, hey, what's this? So I clicked on it, took me to another landing page, and there is a flat, laid out map of the whole moon that when you wrap it around a sphere in a CGI computer program, it'll be a moon. It'll be the whole surface of the moon. But it's full color. And I started looking at this, and from that day on, it changed my perspective on the way we look at the moon. It totally changed my perspective. Because up until that time, I thought the moon was a black and white, gray piece of rock that orbits the Earth.
Well, that's the way NASA depicts it.
Oh, and the Chinese,
Yeah.
the Japanese, and everyone else. But it's a full-color celestial body. I have a movie on my website called Celestial, which I'm sending to you. And in it, see, the thing about full color is you have depth of perception.
Right.
You are able to see stuff. The black and white photos from Apollo that show white stuff that looks like moon dust,
Right.
those are clouds. They're clouds in full color. All right, so it's an incredible find, and it was not a NASA website. Mapaplanet.org is the USGS website, the United States Geological Society.
Survey.
Yeah, so who would have thought that here these guys had all these full color photos? Now, the full color photography was taken in 1994 during the Clementine moon mission. It was high definition, full color photography of the whole entire moon. And 1.8 million digital photos were taken. I've only downloaded 850 shots out of 1.8 million. I still haven't seen that archive.
So what is there? What is there on the moon? Are there buildings?
Yes, you can clearly see buildings. You can see mountains made of gold.
Mountains made of gold.
There's a golden arch that's stretching about 5 or 6 miles above the surface, but it goes from the surface of the moon like that. It's gold, solid gold, man.
Maybe that's just half of a McDonald's golden arches. McDonald's on the moon.
Not like McDonald's, but it's a semicircle.
Right.
There's also cities there. I have in the movie Celestial, you'll see cities, what look like cities and buildings. There are glass domes with buildings inside. There's one glass dome. Doppelmayr is the name of the crater. That's the lower part of the front side of the moon. In it, you can see buildings and a tower that has the number 2 on it. You can clearly see that. All right, and I have stuff on the far side of the moon.
Right.
There's a crater called Lobachevsky that for many of the Apollo missions since the beginning, they've always filmed this crater. I don't know why, but in April of 1972, Apollo 16, the photograph was taken, and there's a machine there, some kind of strange looking thing, that's digging on the side of the crater, digging a hole, okay? And this crater is 6 miles deep. This thing was digging. 8 months later, on Apollo 17, which was the last mission, we went to the moon, December 1972, they filmed the same crater, and guess what? Now there's a structure there. A giant structure that's 10 miles wide and 6 miles high. So someone or something built the structure in 8 months.
Jose, you and I have got to say so long for now, but you're going to be back in the very near future. We have to get this story out there. There's no two ways about it. I want to thank you for all the great work you've done over the years. It's a pleasure calling you my friend. And Exonation, to find out more about Jose Escamilla, go to his website, tblnfilms.com. My name is Rob McConnell. Thank you very much for joining us tonight here in the X Zone. And until the next time, always keep your eyes to the sky and your heart to the light. Good night, everyone.
This is the tough financial unpredictability of the flare may weigh on your mind. Thinking about what to avoid, where to go, and how to work around your UC. That's how I thought it had to be. But then I talked to my doctor about Humira, and learned Humira can help get and keep UC under control when certain medications haven't worked well enough.
Humira can lower your ability to fight infections, including tuberculosis. Serious, sometimes fatal infections and cancers, including lymphoma, have happened, as have blood, liver, and nervous system problems, serious allergic reactions, and new or worsening heart failure. Before treatment, get tested for TB. Tell your doctor if you've been to areas where certain fungal infections are common, and if you've had TB, hepatitis B, are prone to infections, or have flu-like symptoms or sores. Don't start Humira if you have an infection.
Raise your expectations and ask your gastroenterologist if Humira may be right for you. With Humira, control is possible.
Here's to the Wildcats till we die. This I gotta try. Bendy, spendy weekenders.
Whatever kind of weekender you are, there's a Hilton for you.
Book your weekend break direct at Hilton.com and join the weekenders. People are talking about the new Buick. With 4 fresh new models to choose from. What do they say?
Your Buick is so cute.
I'm in a Buick. Does it do it?
Sweet Buick.
Experience the new Buick. Pay no interest for 5 years. Plus get $2,500 down payment assistance on these select Buick sedans when you finance through GM Financial. One of the most in-your-face protest songs. This was a war we did not dream of. Every movement has to have a song. That's what music's meant for.
Directly. He was in his mid-80s. That he took the call. Let me put my conclusions right up front so you know where I'm. Let me put my conclusions right up front. Let me put my conclusions right up front so you know where I'm coming from, besides Linden, New Jersey, a long time ago. I live in Fredericton, New Brunswick, now, for 35 years. First, the evidence is overwhelming. Planet Earth is being visited by intelligently controlled extraterrestrial spacecraft. In other words, some, underlined 18 times, some UFOs are alien spacecraft. Most are not. I don't care about them. Second, we're the subject of flying saucers, and I prefer flying saucers to UFOs because all flying saucers are UFOs. Very few UFOs are flying saucers. All great-grandfathers are men. Not all men are great-grandfathers. I happen to be one, incidentally, so I'm the great-grandfather of ufology. The second conclusion is that we're dealing with a cosmic Watergate. In other words, some few people in government know what's going on. Not many. You don't keep secrets by telling everybody. That's not how... I worked under security for 14 years in the States. And there are a lot of secrets. And you don't get access to all of them. And we'll mention a few as we go along. Anybody who works for the NSA in the past here? I wonder if they'd own up in public. I shouldn't even ask the question. No such agency. NSA, you know. Oh, there's somebody back there. Okay. Waved a hand anyway. The third conclusion is that there are no good arguments against the first two conclusions. And the fourth is we're dealing with the biggest story of the millennium. Visits to planet Earth by alien spacecraft, successful cover-up of the best data, bodies, and wreckage since at least 1947, let's say. We don't know how far back the truth goes. Okay, now, question of evidence. This is the largest study ever done for the United States Air Force. Project Blue Book Special Report 14, the work done at Battelle Memorial Institute in Columbus, Ohio. The report wasn't distributed at the time, 1955. Instead, a press release was put out in which the Secretary of the Air Force lied. I know that's hard to believe, but a government official lying? It happened. And why do I say that? On the basis, this is what he said in the press release. I'm not making this up. On the basis of this study, we believe that no objects such as those popularly described as flying saucers have overflown the United States. I feel certain that even the unknown 3% could have been explained as conventional phenomena or illusions if more complete observational data had been obtained. Yeah, the only trouble with that is that it's total nonsense. Why do I say that? Here's the breakdown of the cases. You'll notice the bottom category, the unknowns. They're the only ones we're interested in. 21.5%. Nobody I know ever rounded off 3 as 21.5. You'll notice the next to the last category, insufficient information. That was the other part of what he said. If more complete observational data had been available, by definition, if there wasn't enough information, it was not listed as an unknown. I'll give this report for getting me started to be heavily involved in ufology. I had found it at the University of California, Berkeley Library. I'd read 10 books before this. None of them had mentioned it. So it came as quite a surprise. And then, because I'm a data hound, I looked through the report, and I look at what the Secretary of the Air Force said, and I say, I don't like being lied to by an official at that level. That pushed me to join APRO and NICAP, the two big old organizations, no longer around. I'm still around, but they're not. And it was, dinner table conversation, not dinner table, but lunch table at the office with other scientists. And I joined those organizations, and I finally decided I wanted to go public. Grant mentioned Frank Edwards. I had moved to Indianapolis. I was on a 3 years here, 3 years there, 3 years someplace else. There's no security in being a nuclear physicist, I'll tell you that. I got to know Frank, and just before I moved to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, to work for Westinghouse Astronuclear after yet another program had been canceled. I think I've set a record for working on canceled government-sponsored R&D programs. Frank gave me a copy of his book. I called him and said, Frank, you know everybody, which he did, and here I am in Pittsburgh. Give me some names of people. I want to go public. He gave me a bunch of names. I get a kick out of one was the director of a great show called Contact, of all things, on KDKA Pittsburgh, one of the big stations in the country. A talk show. I thought, being a Westinghouse nuclear physicist, I'd be welcomed on the show because Pittsburgh is very much a Westinghouse town. And it was, don't call us, we'll call you. Less than a month later, they called me at 6:30. Could I do the 7 o'clock show, please? Somebody had canceled. And I've often wondered, how many guys did they call before they finally found somebody? I lived near the station, so I went on. Somebody at work heard me. That's how I did my first lecture, in somebody's living room. I went on from there to do the program and several other lectures. Happened to ride to work one of 2 days with somebody whose husband was the dean at Carnegie University, Carnegie Tech. I said, I'd like to speak there. Have you talked to the dean? No, I talked to Dr. So-and-so. He wasn't interested. Why don't you talk to the dean, Stan? He's my husband. He heard you on the radio. I called. We booked the talk. He asked me how much that I want. I knew it was a daytime talk. I'd have to take time off work. So I said, how about $100? I figured he'd knock me down to 50. He bought me for 100. Then he told me what he was paying the other speakers in the series. 1,200, 1,500, 1,700. The talk went very well. He wrote the agent through whom he had booked the other speakers, and they booked me at the Engineering Society of Detroit. Now, I drive Japanese cars pretty much, but I still respect the members of the Engineering Society of Detroit. $300 in expenses. They were sold out 3 weeks in advance for 1,008 people for dinner and a talk. And there wasn't one negative question. Now, I couldn't help but respond to that. So that got me rolling. I was a ufologist. People say, why'd you decide to leave industry? I didn't decide. I had a family to support. So then it was, let's get the facts, let's get the data, let's get the lectures, let's keep on. People say, when are you going to retire? I say, why should I retire? I like my boss. That's me. They also did a quality evaluation here. Quality is important. You'll notice that 35% of the best cases could not be explained. Only 18% of the poor ones. And yet you will get people saying, Dr. Donald Menzel said, all witnesses, sightings that can't be explained, are poor observers. Nonsense. Plain, pure nonsense. Here's two other sources of information for people who say there isn't any data. The UFO evidence on the left put out by NICAP, data on thousands of cases, 18% couldn't be explained. On the right, one everybody should be interested in, Symposium on UFOs. The Congress of the United States, Committee on Science and Astronautics, held hearings. 6 scientists testified in person, 6 more of us in writing only. I was one of the latter group of 6. I was the only one of the 12 who didn't have a PhD. And I'm the only one who's still alive, too, because I was the youngest guy, I think. The best paper by Dr. James E. McConnell, a professor of physics, University of Arizona, talked to over 500 witnesses. 41 of the best cases are in this report. Next time somebody tells you, and I have a few copies at my table, that there aren't any good cases, tell them to look at Jim's work. Fine investigator. And then the University of Colorado study, and everybody says, well, didn't they show there was nothing to flying saucers? Well, Dr. Condon claimed that. But if you look at the report and you listen to the findings of a special UFO subcommittee of the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, and I was not a member of the committee, they wouldn't let me on it because even though I'm a member of the AIA, I had reached a conclusion after 11 years of study. That's not surprising, is it? Anyway, they found that any phenomena with 30% of the cases investigated that couldn't be explained is certainly worthy of further investigation. 30%. What percentage of isotopes are fissionable? 1%. Can we build atomic bombs and nuclear reactors? Of course. Who cares about the other 99%? So even the Condon report, 965 pages. And I was given my first copy by KDKA Pittsburgh, the station on which I had done my first radio show. There's Dr. J. Allen Hynek's book. He was the Air Force scientific consultant for 21 years. He lists 70 cases that couldn't be explained. Very conservative man, the same age as my father. I used to chide him about that a little bit. But at least he had the sense to come out and say, hey, there's something worth studying here. He set up the Center for UFO Studies. Funny how the astronomers never talk about Dr. Hynek's book. Kind of interesting. Now, this monstrosity is an early model of the engine of a nuclear-powered aircraft. You look to the lower left, you'll see 2 jet engines. There's a reactor in the middle of the cylinder on top. This is about 1955, 56. I worked on this program for 3 years. Now, you heard about secrecy. There are a lot of things that go on that we just don't know about. When I worked for General Electric Aircraft Nuclear Propulsion Department, in 1958, our budget near Cincinnati was $100 million. 3,500 people worked there, of whom 1,100 were engineers and scientists. This was not 6 professors and 20 grad students. I saw the handwriting on the wall. I get out after 3 years, and it was canceled 16 months after I left. Crazy world. Now, what a flight vehicle would look like is like that. 2 jet engines and a reactor in the middle in that cylinder. It would have the nice advantage of having unlimited range. You could fly for thousands of hours. Most airplanes can't fly for very long, so it would be neat to have such a system. The program was canceled. They all are. Here's a nuclear-powered ramjet. The idea here is to carry it aloft to the B-52, and it would deliver an A-bomb any place in the world. We're good at building things to bomb people with. Then we come to the fission rocket. You'll see a man in the middle there that to give you an idea of the size of these things. There were several different programs. We didn't just talk about them. I worked for Westinghouse on this. The idea is very cold liquid hydrogen comes into the reactor, goes down around, gets heated in the reactor, comes out at 4,000 degrees. Well, you'll see one. I'll show you. There's the one I worked on at Westinghouse. Power level was only 1,100 megawatts. The power level of Hoover Dam is 2,000 megawatts. It's a lot larger than this. This is real. This is not science fiction. The big one was Phoebus. Los Alamos built it. About this big, 4,400 megawatts. Twice the power, a little more than twice the power of Hoover Dam. This was successfully operated, before the program was canceled, of course, in the late 60s. So next time somebody tells you you can't get here from there, well, if you're stuck with chemical engines, that's true. But we're not stuck with chemical engines. This was operated successfully. High point of my professional life before they canceled the program and I was out of a job. But what's really exciting, oh, this is one in operation. Area 51 is behind that mountain. This is out at the nuclear test site. You don't want to be close when these things are running. They're quite radioactive. Those are tanks of liquid hydrogen. The exhaust, these are upward firing systems. It's a lot easier to do that way. This is real. The nuclear test site outside Las Vegas. Now, the real big guy on the block is nuclear fusion. You're all dependent, all of us, on nuclear fusion. That's what makes the energy in the sun. And in every other of the 200 billion stars in the galaxy and in the billions of other galaxies. Nuclear fusion. We have joined the exclusive club. Probably the last ones to join. People on this planet. You've heard about nuclear fusion, H-bombs. Those are fusion devices. We have built them, we have tested them, we have exploded them. Lots of them. The idea of these, don't worry about these being equations. If you look at the top line, that's helium-3 and D for heavy hydrogen, deuterium, gives you helium-4 and proton, I can't even see with my glasses. The big thing is that 18.3 MeV, million electron volts. Now, normal chemical reactions, you light a match, you run an engine on gasoline and oxygen, etc. It's a few electron volts, under 20 per reaction. Each fusion reaction, 18 million electron volts. We're not playing games here. Well, wait, I want to make a point here. There's a little progression. In 1944, a big bomb was a 10-ton blockbuster. Released the energy of 10 tons of dynamite. And you could put it in an airplane, a B-29, and make a big hole in the ground. We used a lot of them in bombing, 44. When we stepped up the nuclear ladder in 1945, the first atomic bomb, fission bomb, released the energy 15,000 tons of dynamite. 15,000 versus 10. We weren't finished. 1952, we exploded our first fusion device. H-bomb released the energy of 10 million tons of TNT. The fireball was 3 miles wide. Obliterated an island. This kind of thing that Grant was talking about. The Russians exploded one a few years later. 57 million tons of TNT energy release. I worked on a study of fusion propulsion for deep space travel in 1962. You can kick particles out the back end of a rocket. That was an Air Force study, incidentally. The particles will have 10 million times as much energy per particle as you can get in a dumb old chemical rocket. So when somebody tells you, you can't get here from there, you might say, you mean on a bicycle? Stupid thing to say. So let's clear up a few points. The real science says if you want to go to the stars, we know how to go. You just got to put up the dough. All the programs that are, like going to the moon cost $20 billion. I'm not saying you can go down to Walmart and order one. It takes a lot of work, a lot of people. But we're accustomed to spending lots of money. In the United States, for example, the world military budget this year is a mere $1 trillion. Trillion. The Washington Post said just the military intelligence budget 2 years ago was $52.6 billion. And all that data is born classified. Mr. Snowden notwithstanding. It was mostly NSA, CIA, NRO, National Reconnaissance Office. So let's get into the real world when we start talking about these things. Is that a response? Okay. Never mind the sauce. You see the guys who were driving. Does a nuclear physicist believe in little green men? Well, they're not green. They usually are little. Yes, I believe our planet has not only been visited by vehicles, but vehicles that have beings inside. Call them aliens if you want, little guys, whatever you want to call them. Not once or twice, lots and lots of times. Wait a minute. Well, okay. Physical trace cases. I better mention these while I'm at it. How come they never landed? I've had people ask me that. I said they land all the time. Ted Phillips in Missouri has collected more than 4,000 physical trace cases from 80 countries, in which people see craft on the ground 1/6 of the time accompanied by beings, for want of a better term. It gets dull. You read a few hundred of these cases, and the same thing keeps happening all over the world. Oh, the New York Times doesn't cover it, or the Washington Post, but it still keeps happening. Read the MUFON Journal. This is a case in Delphos, Kansas. I got involved. This is one of Ted's cases. Ronnie Johnson, age 16, was finishing his chores for the evening, looks up, there's his saucer sitting over the ground there. He's paralyzed, can't move. His dog is too. And then this thing takes off. He dashes in the house, tells his folks, they go out, they see it leave, they call the sheriff. Next day he comes out, checks for radiation. That's all everybody worries about. Well, wasn't radioactive. Ted sent me samples of the soil from the ring that was affected. That's on the right, and from nearby soil on the left. You'll notice that sophisticated soil retention device there. I had somebody who said he wasn't going to believe anything I said because of that lousy paper plate. When I was at the University of Chicago, there was a Nobel Prize-winning physics experiment in which they used a coffee can to hold up an important piece of equipment. It happened to be just the right size. If they can use a coffee can, I can use a paper plate. Had good test run. The soil had too high a level of salts, if you will, to grow anything. For 2 years, it wouldn't grow anything. There are lots of cases like this. The famous Betty and Barney Hill case. The dog is not an alien, that's their dog. And incidentally, my first meeting with the two of them, the only one with Barney, was because that television station, radio station, KDKA, called me and said they were coming to town, told me where they were staying, which is very unusual. And I called and we had dinner together. Barney died less than 6 months later. I was very favorably impressed with them, and I was in Betty's house after that a number of times. And Betty's niece, Kathleen Marden, and I have worked on a couple of books together. We're talking about another one. I was very impressed with the Hills. She was a social worker, incidentally. Barney was on the Governor's Civil Rights Commission. Very special people. One of the important things about that case is Betty, this was done under hypnosis. They only remembered seeing a saucer, and there was a 2-hour missing time period. And they developed physical symptoms. Barney developed ulcers and so forth, and his doctor says, Barney, I can't do anything more for you. I think you ought to see a psychiatrist. Well, people thought that ulcers were triggered by psychiatric input, if you will. So he winds up with Dr. Benjamin Simon, who just happens to be the world's top expert on what today we call PTSD. Harvard psychiatrist, ran a hospital with 3,000 beds for World War II veterans, shell-shock war veterans, they used to call it, PTSD. 3,000 beds. The Army made a movie, Let There Be Light, showing how Dr. Simon used hypnosis to get these people back to sort of normal living. You know, your buddy's head gets blown off next to you in battle. It's hard to handle that. Why him, not me, etc. So Dr. Simon didn't know a darn thing about flying saucers, but he knew an awful lot of people who'd had traumatic experiences. And he has said in writing that the emotional intensity, as they each relived their experience separately, not together, they each had 10 sessions, and he had to stop one each because he thought the emotional intensity was too great. They were terror-stricken. Now here's a guy whose opinion is worth something on that. He worked with thousands of people who'd had traumatic experiences, every bit as great as those of his veterans. Betty, under hypnosis, relives how she's trying to get the leader to tell her where he's from. Great question. I know you're not from around here, she said. Understatement of the week. And instead of answering the question, where you're from, he shows her a three-dimensional model, map, whatever you want to call it, points of light for stars and lines in between, occasional trade routes, that sort of thing. And she asks, well, where are you on the map? And he says, do you know where you are? Well, I don't know anything about astronomy. Well, how can I tell you where I'm from if you don't know where you're at? End of discussion. You know, I really don't know what went on in Dr. Simon's head when he's listening to this. What is this crazy, a star map? But he did something very sensible. He asked if she could remember what it looked like. She said yes. He gives her a post-hypnotic suggestion. If and only if she can remember it accurately, please draw it later on. And she goes home, she draws it, she brings it in, and it's in the book, The Interrupted Journey by John Fuller. And, base stars, occasional trade routes, who knows what this means? Well, a brilliant woman named Marjorie Fish did something nobody else had ever done. She built a bunch of, there's Marjorie. You can see how long ago the picture was taken. Notice my beard there, a little darker. And she was a sculptor. She made the model of what the alien looked like from Betty's description. And she went and visited Betty. She was a school teacher in Ohio. Betty lived in New Hampshire. Went and visited her, got more information. She wound up building more than 20 three-dimensional models looking like this. Her biggest one had 256 stars in it, each in its proper three-dimensional location. That's a lot of numbers to copy out of the star catalogs. The library at Ohio State University wouldn't let her take the catalogs out, the star catalogs. So she had to copy out all these numbers. Fishline built a total of 20 of these. The idea was to walk around the model and see if she could find any pattern that matched in 3 dimensions what Betty had drawn in 2. A reasonable question. Looks hopeless, though. So she kept whittling down the number of stars, because some astronomers say, well, this kind of star wouldn't have planets and blah, blah, blah. Kept following their instructions, basically. Finally, she found a match. It matched angle for angle, line length for line length, what Betty had drawn. And she had asked me to help with this work. I met with her and Dr. Hynek in Chicago at the Adler Planetarium, going over her work, and was able to identify the 16 stars in the pattern. And the numbers have all changed a bit because we didn't have good data on the distance to the stars because nobody was going anywhere. The astronomers would say, you can't get anywhere from here. So what difference does it make? You know the angle, you know where to look for a given star. Doesn't matter whether it's 30 light years or 50, but if you're trying to do what she was trying to do, it does matter a great deal. And so the base stars, Zeta 1 and Zeta 2 Reticuli, can't see them from here. You got to go below the equator. But something very special. They just happen to be the closest to each other pair of sun-like stars in our entire local neighborhood. We're out in the boondocks here. The next star over from the sun is 4.3 light years away. The galaxy is 100,000 light years across, so it's not too far. But these two stars from each other are only an eighth of a light year apart. They're 30 times closer to each other than we are to the next star over. We're out in the boonies. These guys got next door neighbors. From planet around one looking at the other, you can see the other star all day long. You could learn quite a bit about the planets around it. And incidentally, there are about 2,000 stars within 55 light years of here. Don't let anybody ever try to pass off on you the nonsense that, oh, intergalactic travel would take too much energy. Who cares about between galaxies? Andromeda's 2 million light years away. Who cares? They're 39 light years from here. It seems reasonable to me that if you got a next door neighbor, it's going to push you toward having interstellar travel sooner than it pushes us. Doesn't that make sense? You go visit your grandparents if they live only 10 miles away much more often than if they live 1,000 miles away. Okay. I published the first article in that great journal Saga. Probably nobody remembers it. And then I convinced Astronomy Magazine to do an article, which they did. They got more response than anything they'd ever published. And they put together a 32-page full-color booklet with all the original article and the commentary and all that stuff. They sold 10,000 copies almost immediately. And then Carl Sagan, whose name was on the cover of this little 32-page booklet, he and I were classmates at the University of Chicago for 3 years. His lawyer threatened to sue them because his name was on the front. I mean, this had to do with UFOs. We can't have that. So they made me an offer I couldn't refuse, and I wound up with 16,000 copies of that booklet. And if I had any, I'd sell them to you, but they're long gone. It was a bestseller. There it is. And if you, I don't think you can read the print from, maybe you can, and see Carl's name in that list down below the Earth. Zeta Reticuli incident. So, not across the galaxy, not another galaxy, just down the street, around the corner. There's Buster, as Betty used to call him. Here's a book by Kathleen Martin and I. She's Betty's niece. And we go into the star map, the whole story. The first book came out in 1966. The Interrupted Journey by John Fuller was a bestseller. This came out within the last 10 years. And it takes the story forward from the mid-60s. The rest of Betty's life, the things that happened. She died just a few years ago. Pretty special gal. Feisty. And we come to Roswell. I had a guy who's now a congressman from Minnesota tell me, well, it couldn't have been much of a story. It only appeared in a small-town newspaper. I'd sent the producers of that television program 6 front-page stories from major newspapers. He hadn't looked at them. Yes, Roswell's a small town, about 50,000 people. Chicago is a little larger than that. And I had a man from Australia tell me, Stan, what are you talking about? RAAF is Royal Australian Air Force. It's Roswell Army Airfield, darn it. I'll be there next week. They're having their annual UFO festival. When they had the 50th anniversary celebration, there were over 300 newsmen there from all over the world. They draw big crowds. It's not on the way to anywhere. If you're in Roswell, it's because you want to be there. Well, it's true. I mean, if it was in Albuquerque, well, everybody drives through Albuquerque going east-west, but not Roswell. They improved the highway going down there from the big highway. It's now 4 lanes because of all the people going to the museum. This is, I can't use a pointer because if I point at the screen, you won't see it point on your screen. So. Albuquerque in the middle there. White Sands Missile Range in that yellow area was conducted there in that yellow area. Trinity site. You can take a tour, should you wish to do so. That's where we were firing and captured German V-2 rockets and all that sort of thing. And the reason that the stuff was done there is because there's nobody there. People want to go out to the crash site, and I recommend against it. There's no road. There are scorpions and rattlesnakes, hotter than heck. Your cell phone doesn't work very well. No 3A, no gas stations, nothing like that. And there's 10,000 square miles of land that looks exactly like the crash site. Now, I bill myself as the original civilian investigator of the Roswell incident, and I was. How did I find out? Well, I was giving a lecture at Louisiana State University, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I was brought to the local television station, CBS station, to do 3 interviews to promote the lecture that night at Louisiana State University. So I did the first 2. The third reporter was nowhere to be found. This is in 1978. And this is before everybody had a cell phone. And so the station manager, he's giving me coffee. He's looking at his watch. He knew the people who brought me to the station. He knew I had other things to do, and he didn't want to lose the interview. And out of the blue, he says, you know, the guy you ought to talk to is Jesse Marcel. Brilliant investigator that I am, I said, who's he? His answer changed my life. He said, oh, he handled wreckage of one of those saucers you're interested in when he was in the military. What? Where did that come from? You know, we hadn't been talking about anything like it. He wasn't joking. There were just the 2 of us there. Well, what do you know about him? Well, he lives in Homa. That didn't mean anything to me. I'd never been to Homa. I was later to talk to Jesse. He's a great guy. We're old ham radio buddies. You ought to talk to him. I found out later Jesse hadn't told him anything. He'd seen the article in the newspaper in the New Orleans Times-Picayune, I think it's called. And back then, if you had a story about a veteran or somebody in the military, you'd often give his hometown. And the station manager had seen the article. And he was a ham radio guy, and they talked. And I asked him later, what did Jesse tell you? He didn't tell me anything. He said, I can't talk about that. But he had seen the newspaper article. So the next day from the airport, I called information, this Baton Rouge airport, called information, got a number for Jesse Marcel, and talked to him. Mentioned Bill Allen, the guy at the television station. And he told me his story. And people said, well, why did he talk to you? He was one of the few people that couldn't deny his involvement. As I found out later, I didn't know at the time. His name was in newspapers around the world. His picture was in some newspapers. He couldn't say he had nothing to do with that. It turns out he was the intelligence officer for the 509th, the most elite military group in the entire world. Why do I say that? Because they're the guys who dropped the atomic bomb. The 2 on Japan, 2 more in Operation Crossroads. The only people in the world who had nuclear weapons. Hand-picked officers, hand-picked men. This wasn't a bunch of GIs sitting around with nothing better to do but to make up stories. One of the big critics said an anonymous PIO, public information officer, put out an unapproved story. Total nonsense. Walter Haut, the guy who put out the story, was, in the first place, a World War II bombardier, 20 missions over Japan. In second place, a darn good one. He was chosen to drop the instrument package over one of those tests in Operation Crossroads in 1946. And he was close to Colonel Blanchard, who was the base commander. And you'll hear somebody say, oh, he was a loose cannon. Well, that loose cannon got 4 more promotions and was a 4-star general and vice chief of staff of the Air Force when he died in the mid-60s of a heart attack while in his office at the Pentagon. You don't get those 4 promotions unless you've got something on the ball. And on the long way up, he had thousands of nuclear weapons under his control. Loose cannon? I don't think so. I talked to his first and second wife. I talked to his daughter and his 2 sons. I believe you ought to get first-hand testimony about such things. There's Jesse. This picture made it all over the place, a couple of pictures, taken in General Roger Ramey's office. What had happened was the rancher who found some of this wreckage came into town because he'd heard that there was a reward being offered for wreckage, and the guys in Corona, New Mexico, said, why don't you go see the sheriff's office? They knew about the story because they read newspapers. The rancher, Mac Brazel, didn't get a newspaper, didn't have a telephone. But when they said, check on the reward, he went into the sheriff's office in Roswell. The sheriff called the base, as he was supposed to do. And Jesse Marcel, the base intelligence officer, talked to his boss, who said, follow him out. They took the counterintelligence corps guy, because they thought maybe somebody's spying. Remember, this is the only guys with nuclear weapons in the world. For sure it would be a target of Russian or anybody else's spies. So Jesse goes out with the counterintelligence corps, follows the rancher, Mac Brazel, out to the middle of nowhere, 75 miles or so away, sees this area covered in small pieces of very strange material. Jesse had seen airplane crashes in the Pacific, and there wasn't anything conventional out there. No wire, no vacuum tubes, no tags saying made in Oshkosh or whatever. Put stuff in his car, leaving most of it out there, comes back, takes it into the base the next morning, but the night when he comes back, he stops at home and shows some to his wife and son, Jesse Jr. And you saw Jesse Jr. talking about his meeting with Dick D'Amato in Washington. I met with Dick that same day in that same sub-basement. Don't know why that all went on, but it did. Jesse, that was in the picture that you saw, was a medical doctor, a colonel, had been called in at age 68, was flying combat missions in the Middle East. 225 combat hours flying helicopters. He was a flight surgeon, and they were in short supply. Age 68. And when Peter Jennings did his, I'll call it a special, not very, show about UFOs, I mean, I was interviewed for over an hour. They used 20 seconds, called me an operator twice. They had Jesse on, didn't mention he was a doctor, didn't mention he was a colonel, serving at that time in the Army, and on leave from flying tough missions in the Middle East. This is how television's supposed to operate? I expected a good deal from Peter Jennings. We both have the same birthday, July 29th, and both Canadians and Americans. I'd forgotten that Benito Mussolini was also born on July 29th. You know, can't win them all. It's taken in the same office that General Roger Ramey, head of the 8th Air Force. Colonel Blanchard reported to him, and Thomas Jefferson Dubose, his right-hand man. But the phony wreckage that they substituted for the stuff that Jesse had brought, he, under Colonel Blanchard, told him to take this stuff to our headquarters in Texas, Fort Worth, Texas. And of course he followed orders. And when he got there, they took his stuff, brought out this phony balloon wreckage. It's real wreckage, but of a balloon that was conventional, weather balloon. And this picture made it all over the place. And it's kind of interesting. Ramey is holding in his hand this little message, and somebody has managed to use some good computer stuff, and it has words like victims of the wreck. Did you ever hear of a weather balloon that had victims of the wreck? I mean, come on. There's Tommy DuBose. I thought he might still be alive. I checked with West Point that maybe he had gone there, and he had, and he was still alive in Florida, and I went and saw him. And he told me directly, he was in his mid-80s, that he took the call from Ramey's boss.
He followed the proper protocol in that process, which is a handwritten notification. And at the same time, no matter how you fire someone, it's never an easy process. And
General McConnell, giving him 3 orders. They knew each other. Also West Pointer, as was Ramey, as was DuBose, as was Blanchard. Gave him 3 orders. Get the press off our back. I don't care how you do it. This is after this press release went all over the place. Send some of that wreckage up here today with one of your Colonel Couriers from Fort Worth to Washington. And 3, I don't want you ever to talk about it, not even with your buddy Roger Ramey. That's an order. Do I need to put it in writing? No, sir. When a 2-star general tells a colonel what to do, he does it. People say, why did he follow orders? Because that's what you do. This was 2 years after the end of the war. Both West Pointers, both knew each other. So don't be surprised that he followed orders. But of course, by the time I talked to him, Ramey was dead. McMullen was dead. The Roswell story was out in the open, so to speak. Not enough, but some. But that's just to prove that you go to the source. Part of his interview is in a DVD out there, Recollections of Roswell. We have more than 20 first-hand witnesses. Unfortunately, they're all dead. So I can't tell you go re-interview them, because unless you know how to, well, some of you may know how to reach the other side, but I don't. Whoops. That was in the newspaper. The rancher was taken from his ranch back to the base and given a new story to tell. He said, if I ever see anything again, I won't report it. There's that Roswell report. You see, the Air Force put out several different explanations. First, flying saucer. Then, radar reflector weather balloon combination. And then, mogul balloons, super secret balloon project. The idea was to launch this train of 25 balloons, keep them at high altitude, and listen for a Soviet atomic test. We didn't know when they were going to have their first test, but these would stay at a constant altitude for a long time. It wasn't super secret. The purpose of the project was super secret. None of the technology was. And there was no balloon launch that matched the date and all the rest of that. And when balloons sit in the desert in New Mexico for, say, a month, they turn pretty much to crummy old stuff because of the heat. They're just plastic. Not very good plastic at that. So that was the next explanation. And then finally the crash test dummy that Grant mentioned. Now, you know, I got to admire their gall, their guts. None of the crash test dummies were dropped until 6 years after Roswell. So we got time travel for crash test dummies. And here's what they look like. The dummy's in the middle. I talked to the man on the right, a colonel. We met, had breakfast together in Albuquerque, and he stressed that for the test to be meaningful, the dummies had to be the same size and weight as pilots. They were 6 feet tall and 175 pounds. And you notice that they're in uniform gear. Why is that? Because if you go out of an airplane in an ejection seat, let's say at 40,000 feet, the clothes you have on affect the heating and the drag. And you're trying to find out how soon do you pull the ripcord. If you stay up there too long, you might freeze to death because it's very cold up at 40,000 feet. So the clothes were important. Now, I'm sure that any rancher finding a crash test dummy like that, and often the limbs fell off, they're just made out of wood, is going to think we're being invaded by aliens? How absurd. Now, the New York Times carried the story. They didn't bother to interview the colonel. Don't bother me with the facts, my mind's made up. Crash test dummy sounds like a reasonable explanation for the talk about bodies. There was more than talk, there were bodies. Then we come to, can't go into details, but I'll be talking about it on Sunday. I'm the last speaker, about Operation Majestic 12. We got a roll of film with 8 pages of a briefing, supposedly top secret magic, for President-elect Eisenhower, talking about how in 1947, shortly after Roswell, President Truman established this group called Majestic 12 to deal with it. And it mentioned that bodies were found. It's detailed. And the question, of course, is whether the roll of film, whether the documents are legitimate. I spent a heck of a lot of time on that. I've written a whole book, Top Secret Magic, which is out at the table. You can check on me. I'm convinced that there were 4 genuine MJ-12 documents, Majestic 12. And there were dozens of phony documents. It would seem natural to me that Air Force intelligence, if good stuff gets out, puts out garbage and hoping it'll rub off some of the garbage on the good stuff. Well, these are phony, so they must all be phony. Disinformation is an important part of intelligence work. We made a real effort and succeeded in convincing Hitler that the landing in Europe, which was sure to come, was going to be at Calais rather than at Normandy. And when the generals went to Hitler and said, release the reserves after the landing happened, Hitler said, no, that's not the real landing. It's going to be over there at Calais. And held back until it was too late. We even put phony papers in the jacket pocket of an officer who had died, dropped the body in the ocean near Spain, knowing that the Germans would get it. And it hinted at, if you will, a Calais situation. Disinformation is a game that's played quite a lot, and it's quite important. But these are not disinformation. They're significant. And I've put together a list. You can write me. There's a list out there. You can get my email address and so forth, of the false claims that have been made by the debunkers of this. And all the things that we didn't know until after we got the documents that were true. How did a hoaxer know that when nobody knew that on the outside? It's a complicated story. But it wouldn't be strange to find disinformation to go with the information. You can't stand up in public and say, well, these are genuine documents, or these are phony documents. You just imply it along the way. It's a game that's played. It lists the members of this group that was set up, MJ-12, Majestic 12. The most interesting name on this list, some of you will recognize some of the names, General Twining, James Forrestal, General Vandenberg. The third from the bottom, Dr. Donald Menzel. And immediately, obviously a phony document. He was a debunker. He was a Harvard University professor of astronomy. Everybody else got a high-level clearance. You don't need a clearance to teach astronomy at Harvard. And how would a debunker be part of such a group? Wrote 3 anti-UFO books, gave speeches, etc. Well, I had to get permission from 3 different people. All these guys were dead. How convenient. To see his papers at Harvard, because I found one memo which raised some questions about a loyalty hearing. They were trying to take away his security clearance. What did he need a security clearance for? So I contacted the people at Harvard, look at his papers. I had to get permission in writing from 3 different people to look at them. Got the permission, went there, discovered to my total shock, I didn't like him when he was alive,
frankly. I looked at his papers, and there he's writing Kennedy. He had a longer continuous association with the NSA of anybody in the country, 30 years, and its Navy predecessor. Turned out he was a world-class cryptographer. Did classified work for the CIA and a bunch of companies and agencies. Nobody knew any of this. I was totally shocked. And I still get people saying, well, he was a debunker. Every spy, let me give you three names, Burgess, Philby, and McLean. These guys were all employed by British intelligence. They were all Russian spies. That's where you got to really be careful, because you can't say anything where somebody will point to you and say, how could they have gotten this information except from this guy? So the game is played. It's an exciting story. It's not over. This is one of the memorandum, and there are all kinds of details, which I don't have time to go into. I'll be talking about MJ-12 on Sunday in detail. Here's a letter from Truman to Secretary of Defense Forrestal authorizing the establishment of Operation Majestic 12. Here's a memo we found, and all kinds of attacks on this memo. Phil Klass, the biggest debunker of all. Oh, you didn't notice, I suppose, that it was done in the large pica type, but the National Security Council, it mentions NSC on there, only used elite type. I got 9 samples to prove it. I challenge you to find any genuine documents from the NSC done in the same size and style pica type. I'll pay you $100 each. It's got to meet certain requirements, up to a maximum of 10. Well, he'd never been to the Eisenhower Library. I checked and found out. And I was going there anyway. To make a long story short, I dug out 14 that met all his requirements, made copies, sent him an invoice for $1,000. He set a limit of 10. It's a shame, because I would have been a rich man. Anyway, sent him an invoice, and he paid me $1,000. Didn't tell anybody about paying me. He told everybody about challenging me. And it surprises people. There's his check. Well, this is what I mean when you got to check firsthand. I went to the library, I dug out, it's easy to pick out pica from elite. And he couldn't fight it. But it's typical of the intellectual bankruptcy of the pseudoscience of anti-ufology. Don't bother me with the facts, my mind's made up. But the public doesn't know, I'm not going to tell them. If you can't attack the data, attack the people. And do your research by proclamation, because investigation is too much trouble and nobody will know the difference anyway. So I come on strong with these guys. I've done debates on Coast to Coast Radio. Dr. Michael Shermer, head of the Skeptics Society. It's a debunking society. It's not a skeptic society. I got 80% of the vote. Dr. Seth Shostak of the SETI Institute. SETI stands for Silly Effort to Investigate, SETI, based on a whole bunch of unscientific notions. Like aliens are stuck using our technology for sending radio signals. I don't use the slide rule anymore. Why would they be stuck with old technology? First long-distance radio, 1901. That's not very long ago. And besides, who are they sending a message to here? When we make contacts as some of the SETI people, they will then help us solve our problems. The nearest one might be as close as 1,000 light years. Hey out there, we got a problem. What can we do for you? 2,000 years later, we get the answer back. That's a real help. I'm not making this up. Here's my book, Top Secret Magic, M-A-J-I-C. And in case you're wondering, yes, there is a cover-up. Well, you can't prove that, Friedman. There's no cover-up. That's what people will tell me. Well, sure I can. Here's Jesse Marcel Jr.'s book. I wrote the foreword. Here's my book about Roswell. I think I have some documents here. That's that
DVD. You don't care about that. I'll show you some quick pictures just because it's a UFO lecture. Up in the middle at the top, this is Hawaii. I think what's behind it is an ionized air plasma related to a magneto-aerodynamic propulsion system similar to the electromagnetic submarine that was successfully operated a number of years ago. Where's the Mormon temple? Salt Lake City, isn't it? Yeah. The UFO is in the middle on the top. I talked to the photographer who took the pictures. I think there's another one, number 5, with an ionized air plasma around it. Santa Ana, California. A guy who worked for the state of California took the pictures. This is McMinnville, Oregon. I got to replace this. Something happened to it. I don't know what. Even the University of Colorado study couldn't find an explanation for this picture other than legitimate. Series off the island of Trindade, off the coast of Brazil. Mid-50s. Ship was there as part of the International Geophysical Year. Everybody said, there goes a flying saucer, take a picture. The official Navy photographer took the pictures up central there. These were released to the public by the president of Brazil, incidentally. Oh, yeah. The cover-up. This is a CIA top-secret Umbra UFO document. You can read, I think there are 8 words on this page that you can read. And don't say scrape off the black. They send you Xeroxes. There's nothing under there. I've got dozens of these. There's another one. And what I thought I had but don't seem to have is an NSA top-secret Umbra UFO document. I got 156 of them. They didn't use blackout because they heard, and they told me this, they heard from Mr. Class that I showed these documents, blacked out version of some of the documents on television, and didn't say that it was because of sources and methods, which of course I did say, but so they only used whiteout. I've got 156 pages of top secret Umbra NSA UFO documents on which you can read 1 sentence per page. And yet I got people saying, Stan, there's no cover-up. I say, can you read what's under the whiteout? Well, no, then there's a cover-up. That's pretty straightforward. This is my favorite CIA UFO document. They couldn't find 8 words to declassify on this page. Deny in toto. Orders were actually issued in 1952. Shoot them down if they don't land when instructed to do so. Now, how do you tell a UFO pilot, hey, get your tail on the ground, buddy? I have personally heard 7 stories after my lecture of people who were at military bases where a pilot was scrambled to chase a UFO. Orders were issued, incidentally, to do that. Shoot them down if they don't land when instructed to do so. I have heard 7 different cases where guys were at bases where a pilot was scrambled and never came back. If I've heard 7 cases, there are a lot more than that. This is Frank Ficino's book about the Flatwoods Monster case, and he finds 200 cases of fatal military plane crashes between 1951 and 1956. 5 of the pilots were guys who had flown 100 missions in Korea, where MiGs were chasing them and trying to shoot them down. They come back here, and they have fatal crashes. That's a little unusual. You've got to be a pretty good pilot to fly 100 missions when people are trying to shoot you down. That's one of the DVDs out there. Seth Shostak, we debated. I got 57% of the vote. He got 33%, and 10% said, I don't know who won. This was on Coast to Coast Radio. Enrico Fermi. You've heard of the Fermi paradox. He had a great scientist, one of the reasons I went to the University of Chicago. Nobel Prize. He was well known for asking questions as part of his teaching methodology. And they were having lunch at Los Alamos when, as they left, they were talking about how little time it would take to colonize the entire galaxy. And as they were leaving, Fermi said, "So where is everybody?" He didn't say there's nobody coming here. He asked the question. And there's a whole book that's been written with answers to that question. I think the true answer was, we don't know where everybody is. We know that some of them come here and the government knows a great deal about them and isn't telling us. Fermi was the one who put together the first nuclear chain reaction. Chain reacting pile, if you will, part of the atom bomb project. He had a high-level security clearance. Whether he knew anything about flying saucers, I have no idea. And he died while I was at Chicago, so I certainly didn't have a chance to ask him. But don't be fooled by people saying that Fermi said nobody was coming here. Not so. There's my book. How's the timing? Yeah, we're done. Thank you very much for listening.
Welcome to another edition of the X Zone. My name is Rob McConnell, and I'm your host and your guide as together we cross the time space. Welcome to another edition of the X Zone. My name is Rob McConnell, and I'm your host and your guide as together we cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And joining me this hour from Mission Hills in California is Jose Escamilla. Anyone within the UFO community, anyone who's ever looked at UFOs, anyone who's ever had an interest in UFOs knows Jose Escamilla. I first met Jose years ago during the X Zone radio show when we were talking about the Roswell rods. Over the years, Jose and I have kept in communication. He's done up to date 12 documentaries. He's working on his newest venture. But let's go to Jose in Mission Hills, California. Jose joins us via Skype. And Jose, welcome to the X Zone again.
Well, hello there, Rob. It's good to talk to you again.
Good talking to you too, my friend. For those people in the X Zone TV audience who have never heard of you or who aren't too sure who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, first of all, I was raised in Roswell, New Mexico. I'm from Roswell, the epicenter of UFOs.
Right.
Where the Roswell crash happened. And I got known in this area because I filmed 16 minutes on March 5th, 1994. 16 minutes
New
of
Pantene doesn't just wash your
UFO
hair,
activity.
it fuels it,
And
making every
it
strand
turns
strong.
out that
So tangles don't
the
stand a
activity
chance.
continued
Because
daily
strong
basis.
is beautiful.
On March 19th, I was filming for
I was wondering
UFOs.
if an electric
and
toothbrush really
there were
cleans better
these
than
things
manual, and my hygienist says it does, but they're not all the same. Turns out they're really different. Who knew? I had no idea. So she said look for one that's shaped like a dental tool with a round brush head.
Go Pro with Oral-B. Oral-B's rounded brush head surrounds each tooth to gently remove more plaque, And Oral-B cross-action is clinically
Welcome to the
proven
X-Zone TV
more
show.
plaque
My
than
name
sonic
is
or
Rob
dynamic.
McConnell, and the X-Zone is a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And on tonight's show, I have the grandfather of ufology himself, the man who inspires so many people within the UFO community, the man who gives hope to those who believe that one day soon, the truth will be out there. This gentleman is so familiar to the UFO community that Agents Scully and Mulder have posters of him in their bedrooms. Joining me now from Fredericton, New Brunswick, is the grandfather of ufology, the one and only Stanton T. Friedman. Stanton, great having you back with us today.
I was wondering if an electric toothbrush.
So, Stan, before we went on air, you
it
recited a nursery rhyme.
Same.
And I was wondering if you could recite that very rhyme for all our
She said,
listeners
look
and
for one
watchers.
that's shaped like a dental tool with a round brush head.
Go pro with Oral-B. Oral-B's rounded brush head surrounds each tooth to gently remove more plaque. And
Fascinating and fantastic, Stan. Stan, what's new in the world of ufology?
So clean.
Well, not a lot, I guess you could say. Sightings go on, denials go on, the debunkers keep at it. I have things coming up this year that I haven't done before, and some that I have. Last year I missed Roswell, and I missed MUFON because I had a heart attack at the wrong time. And so my plans are to go to Roswell in early July and MUFON in California in September. Everything's on my website. It lists the places and so forth. And I'll be not too far from you, as a matter of fact, Toronto and Hamilton, too, later on. So I'm keeping busy. It's an interesting time in the sense that the debunkers keep at it, but there seems to be growing acceptance of the notion that we're not alone, that aliens are visiting, and so forth. And, you know, it's a battle I've been fighting since I gave my first lecture in 1967. We have the nasty, noisy negativists, as I call it, making their ridiculous claims about there being no evidence, that governments can't keep secrets, that interstellar travel is impossible. There's a lot of these claims. And I can rightfully say you can see many examples in the book that Kathleen Marden and I did, Science Was Wrong. Smart people have been saying stupid things for a lot of years, frankly, and some of them relevant to UFOs. And I was just reviewing, I was writing a piece about the Condon study. Dr. Edward U. Condon, who did a study, he got $313,000 and another $100,000. So, unlike us poor ufologists, he had money to work with. And I was just looking at some of his comments about interstellar travel. In the foreseeable future, it's impossible, is basically what he said.
I was wondering if an electric toothbrush really cleans better than a manual, and my hygienist says it does, but they're not all the same. Turns out they're really different. Who knew? I had no idea. So she said, look for one that's shaped like a dental tool with a round brush head.
Go pro with Oral-B. Oral-B's rounded brush head surrounds each tooth to gently remove more plaque.
What's wrong with
and
that?
Oral-B cross-action is clinically proven to remove more plaque than sonic or dynamic cleaner.
My mouth feels so clean. I'll only use an Oral-B.
The #1 brand used by dentists worldwide. Oral-B. Brush like a pro.
The problem with that is
I was wondering if
you
an
use an
electric
enormous
toothbrush
amount of
really
fuel
cleans
to
better
do
than a
that.
manual,
You get
and my
the
hygienist
cruise
says
velocity.
it does, but they're not all the same. Turns out they're really different. Who knew? I had no idea. So she said, look for one that's shaped like a dental tool with a round brush head.
Go pro with Oral-B. Oral-B's rounded brush head surrounds each tooth to gently remove more plaque. And Oral-B cross-action is clinically proven to remove more plaque than sonic or dynamic cleaner.
My mouth feels so clean. I'll only use an Oral-B.
The #1 brand used by dentists worldwide. Oral-B. Brush like a pro.
During World War II.
I was wondering if an electric toothbrush really cleans better than a manual, and my hygienist says it does.
And he
but
might
they're
very
not all the
well
same. Turns out they're really
have
different.
known a
Who knew?
great
I had no
deal
idea.
about
So she said, look for one that's shaped like a dental tool with a round brush head.
Go pro
say
with
it's all
Oral-B.
nonsense.
Oral-B's rounded brush head surrounds each tooth to gently remove more plaque. And Oral-B cross-action is clinically proven to remove more plaque than sonic or dynamic cleaner.
My mouth feels so clean. I'll only use an Oral-B.
The #1 brand used by dentists worldwide. Oral-B. Brush like a pro.
Total debunker, everybody thought.
I will never wash my hair again. New Pantene doesn't just wash your hair, it fuels it, making every strand stronger. So tangles don't stand a chance. Because strong is beautiful.
Nobody knew anything about this. As a matter of fact, he was a
I was
world-class
wondering if
cryptographer.
an electric toothbrush.
Taught cryptography at the beginning of World War II. They were trying to find
I was
women
wondering
to
if
work in
an
code
electric
breaking.
toothbrush really cleans better than a manual.
Women,
And my
because
husband
women
is
go off to
an electric
war,
toothbrush
stuff
really
like
cleans
that.
better than a manual.
And
Turns out
only
it
because
really
they
does.
found out
It
that
does.
women were better at it.
So she says look for one that's shaped like a dental.
But,
Who knew? I had no idea. So
Go
she said
for
look
it.
for one that's shaped like a
Oral-B's
dental
rounded
with
brush
a
head
round
surrounds
brush.
each tooth to gently remove more plaque. Oral-B's rounded brush head surrounds each tooth to gently remove more plaque. And Sonicare cross-action is clinically proven to remove more plaque than Sonicare. The number one brand used by
The
dentists
plot
worldwide.
thickens, and we'll continue the plot thickening and trying to get at the truth with our very special guest this hour, the one and only Stanton T. Friedman. His website is www.stantonfriedman.com. My name is Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone, www.xzonetv.com. We'll be back after this break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the X Zone. My name is Rob McConnell. This is X Zone TV, www.xzonetv.com. Stanton T. Friedman is my very special guest this segment of the X Zone. He is truly the grandfather of ufology, because I believe if Stanton Friedman hadn't written his books on Roswell and co-authored so many other books with so many other great people, you know what? Ufology wouldn't be where it is today. Stanton, great seeing you again. And what is the hardest part about being a member of the UFO research group these days? Being an independent researcher yourself, what's the hardest part for you?
Well, it's dealing with the repeated silly arguments that you keep hearing no matter what. Don't bother me with the facts, my mind's made up. So you have to go through the whole business again. There are three areas where people insist that good basis for not believing that any UFOs are alien spacecraft. One is there is no evidence. And you look at their books, the SETI community in particular, you don't find any references to the large-scale scientific studies. You know, you're supposed to look at facts if you're going to express an opinion. Have facts in hand before putting mouth in gear should be a general rule, especially for scientists.
Should be.
Yeah, the second area is that you can't get here from there, what we were just talking about. You know, you could say the obvious time it takes to go around the planet is 3 years. I mean, Magellan, that's what his ship managed to do. Well, the space station does it in under 100 minutes. You know, there's a big difference between 3 years and 100 minutes. But, of course, we're not using sails on that.
Right.
The third area, I mean, we'll get into the technology a little bit more, because I did a study of fusion propulsion way back. I was working for Aerojet General Nucleonics in California in 1962. And my boss was the guy who had headed the fusion research at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. Brilliant man with a high school diploma and 40 patents and an honorary PhD. And he was always doing things that the PhDs who worked for him said couldn't be done. Just had a feel for how the world worked. And I bring that up because it's amazing how astronomers, all of whom know that almost all the energy in the universe is produced by nuclear fusion. That's what goes on in the stars. That's not a guess.
Wow.
You look around, the stars are fusioning away. We didn't find out there was such a thing as fusion until 1938, you understand. But there were kind of Johnny-come-latelys on the scene. But they never talk about fusion propulsion for deep space travel. We've operated fission propulsion, and you'd think we'd learn from the nuclear Navy. I think most people are aware that the Navy has submarines that can go around the world underwater. In World War II, they could stay under for 1 day.
Right.
Because they needed air for the diesel engines, you know.
And I don't think anybody watching tonight, Stan, doesn't remember the polar explorations and the Arctic exploration that was done by the Nautilus. And that was one of the very first nuclear power submarines.
Yeah, back in the 50s.
Yeah.
And I should add to that we also have nuclear-powered aircraft carriers.
That's right.
And the interesting thing about them, besides that they're huge and they carry 75 little airplanes, is that they can operate for 18 years without refueling. So if you want to go use your energy efficiently, and a carrier can steam, if I can put it that way, at full speed for years. There was nobody in the Navy who could do that before because you had to refuel and not a lot of gas stations out there, you know.
That's right.
So we have a two-stage system. The big monster that carries the little modules. And it's the same way with star travel. You got two very different environments. Airplanes in the air, aircraft carriers on the ship, on the water. But for interstellar travel, you got vehicles going between the star systems, where there's nothing for practical purposes. And then when you get near a planet or a solar system, you have your little Earth excursion modules, as I like to call them, who zip around in the atmosphere. And if you look at the physical trace cases, the abduction cases, you don't find people dealing with motherships. They see them in the sky, big old monster. 0.6 of a mile, I remember one of them out in the Yukon. That's pretty big craft.
Sure is.
On the ground. Ted Phillips' Earth landing trace cases, they're all under 100 feet in diameter, in size, compared to half a mile or more for the motherships. So that's not exotic technology, the notion of a two-stage system. It's what we do. And it's not exotic to say they're nuclear powered. I worked in the nuclear industry for 14 years. And that leads you to the fact that secrets can be kept. I hear people telling silly nonsense about governments can't keep secrets. Dr. Tyson says the proof of that is how much we know about President Clinton's genitalia. It's a very funny comment. What's it got to do with reality?
Everything.
You know, it is really strange how people don't understand how big the classified budgets are. 2 years ago, the Washington Post said that the military intelligence budget, not hardware or anything, just military intelligence, was $52.6 billion.
Wow.
Billion. And that's mainly NSA, CIA, and NRO, National Reconnaissance Office.
All right. That's a lot of money, Stanton. Stand by, my friend. You and I have to take a break here. X-Zone Nation, Stanton T. Friedman is my very special guest, a good friend of the X-Zone. His website is stantonfriedman.com, and Stanton and I will be back on the other side of this break as we continue here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Welcome back, everyone. Stanton T. Friedman is my very special guest this hour here in the X-Zone, www.stantonfriedman.com. Stan, a lot of money goes into different projects. You and I were talking about $52 billion going into a project, several projects before we went to our break. What would happen, or let me rephrase the question. Do you think NASA needs to be spending all the money that they're spending on trying to get to Mars, manned missions to Mars? Wouldn't it seem more logical to put the money that they're putting into this mission into real UFO research with people like yourself who have been doing it for years upon years, who know the ins and outs of the... What's your take on that?
It would make sense, except that it leaves out the security aspect. Governments obviously consider the reality of flying saucers to be a very classified topic. And that's why I keep bringing up the fact that people don't realize how big the classified budgets are, how many billions of dollars have been spent on a wide variety of programs. And it's because of the national security aspects, I would expect it to be done not by NASA, which does do classified work. I worked on fission nuclear rockets. We tested them. Kind of neat. They worked, and they canceled the program.
Of course, it worked.
Yeah, can't have that. But I think NASA is looking for an excuse to stay in business. And the public was very excited about the Apollo program. It was our program. I say that half of me is American, so, you know. And the country took pride in it, and it went on even though 3 guys died on the pad. You know, gutsy, let's do it. National pride and all that sort of stuff. NASA hasn't really had a mission since then. All of us who worked on the space program back in the 60s are very disappointed that we haven't set up a base on the moon, that we haven't gone to Mars, when we would be able to do it if we wanted to. So it's a question of purpose and redirecting the money. But the NASA budget is small potatoes compared to the military budgets, the NRO, the CIA, the NSA, all these guys. And people don't realize we have had a number of programs that were multi-billion-dollar costs that were kept secret for decades after they were finished. We broke the German codes, the English did, during World War II. You'd think they'd say, you know, it was extremely important to winning the war. But there was nothing in public discussed about that for 25 years after the war. Can governments keep secrets? Of course. Eisenhower set up Operation Solarium, 3 different teams to look at how should we contain the Soviets. This is in 1953, mind you.
Mm-hmm.
This went on. They set national policy for more than 20 years. No public awareness of Solarium until the 80s, for goodness sakes. 25 years again. So secrets can be kept. And I think NASA doesn't really have a good mission set up. And they're looking for it. UFOs obviously would get you into areas like very high-speed flight in the atmosphere, highly maneuverable flight. But that's military right from the start. The first country, company, whatever, to duplicate flying saucer behavior is going to rule the roost, because they can fly circles on anything we got flying. And again, we're talking about big bucks would be involved.
But what about all the people who talk about reverse engineering that has been accomplished because of the Roswell crash?
Well, I keep hearing people tell me that, but I can't find many examples. In my book, Flying Saucers and Science, there's a picture of me with my hand on the Apollo 12 command module. And it's a big, round, blunt body. It looks far more like a UFO than like a high-speed aircraft. Remember how we used to think high-speed aircraft, you want to go fast at the speed of sound, got to have a pointy nose, sharp wings, highly streamlined? No. As it turns out, the Apollo command module comes in at 25,000 miles an hour, and it's round and blunt and looks much more like a UFO. So we may have learned that from studying it. Certain materials, the samarium cobalt permanent magnets, those are real. I didn't make that up. And what I would have done if we had the pieces of wreckage from Roswell would be to send them off to the classified labs, not to some university, classified labs, and say, what is this stuff? And the guy would come back and say, you know, I don't know where you got this stuff, because he wouldn't have a need to know for that, but it's a combination of samarium and cobalt. Why would anybody put, not your problem. Send it off to other people, whatever its special properties. Turns out the highest magnetic moment of any material that had ever been tested at that time. It was the basis for ghetto blasters, the magnets and the speakers.
Oh, right.
And I didn't find out until many years after I suggested that the original work on samarium cobalt was done at Wright Air Development Center, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. But I know where that idea came from. But that's different from being able to develop a full system.
All right, stand by, my friend. You and I have got to take our next break. Exonation, the one and only Stanton T. Friedman is my special guest, www.stantonfriedman.com, and we'll both be back on the other side of this break as we continue here in the X Zone from Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away. And welcome back to the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell. My special guest this segment of the X Zone, all the way from Fredericton, New Brunswick, and parts unknown, the one and only Stanton T. Friedman. His website is www.stantonfriedman.com. You can buy his books, his DVDs, and learn a whole lot about not only Stanton, but the great work that he's done over the years in the field of ufology. Stanton, in your opinion, what is the hardest challenge that modern-day ufologists are facing?
The biggest challenge is getting young people into the field, frankly. I think we need more people. There are a lot of us old guys still hanging around.
Mm-hmm.
But we need a new generation which has grown up with the idea that space travel is feasible, that, you know, we're not alone, the Kepler satellite and all this kind of stuff. We need to make more of an effort. Also, another group that needs some pushing is the press. My paper last year at the MUFON conference, I didn't give it, but it's included in the proceedings, had to do with press coverage of the subject, giving a lot of examples of bad coverage and the need to change. This year, my paper, incidentally, is how to make ufology more respectable. And that's a challenge, partly because many people are frightened to take a stand. They think nobody else believes in flying saucers, so they don't want to stick their neck out.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to change that. I know there are professors who think they'll lose tenure if they mention UFOs. But look, 700 lectures I've given in 50 states, 10 provinces, and 18 other countries. I've had 11 hecklers, and 2 of them were drunk. And as you know, I come on very, very strong. So it's okay as long as you stick to the facts, as long as you have your data. If you haven't thought about the question before you get asked it, then you haven't done your homework. You should be ready to answer any questions. You rarely get new ones, believe me. I can say that after answering 60,000 questions now, I think, over the years. So trying to be respectable means convincing the press to do a good job, convincing other scientists that it's okay to stand up and be counted, and taking them on, head first, if you will, but facts in hand. You mentioned Seth Shostak before. He and I have debated. I got 57% of the vote. He got 33%, and 10% said, I don't know who won. The SETI community is getting by with mythology, frankly. They're assuming that there are beings out there who are using technology appropriate to us, and for some crazy reason are sending us radio or laser signals. I can't figure out what that reason would be.
Yeah.
I don't make random phone calls out into the ether, so to speak, see if there's anybody there. They know we're here.
Mm-hmm.
Once you look at the evidence, it's obvious aliens are coming here. So they certainly don't need to send us signals to let us know, hey, look, we're out here, guys. What for? I don't talk to the squirrels, not very often anyway. Not too many of them around these days with all the snow here. But their assumptions are silly. That's why I call it silly effort to investigate, SETI, rather than search for extraterrestrial intelligence. But they need to wake up. They need to look at the evidence, both for the government cover-up and the interstellar travel and the vast amount of evidence that they refuse to look at. It's amazing. I read their books. They don't read mine. Seth did admit once on the radio show that he had a copy of my book, Flying Saucers and Science, on his nightstand. He didn't say he'd read it now.
Well, I guess that was to impress all the ladies. Because they figured, because the ladies would figure, well, Stanton T. Friedman, this must be a cool guy. Stan, before we say so long for today, what is your message for our viewers and our listeners that you, Stanton T. Friedman, would like to make to the world?
I want people to recognize, A, that we're not alone, B, that we're behaving like a primitive society whose major activity is tribal warfare, spending $1 trillion this year on things military when thousands of kids die every single day of preventable disease and starvation. In other words, anybody looking at us from afar would say, they're a bunch of idiots here. Why would they come here? To keep us from going out there. We need to recognize that everybody is concerned about their own survival and giving our history. We killed 50 million of our own people in World War II. That tells us a great deal about us, and it's not good. So I think we need to wake up and realize in the larger picture, there are others out there who can pass judgment on us, and we don't come out looking very good.
Words of wisdom from Stanton T. Friedman. Stan, thanks so much for joining us today here in the X Zone. Always great talking to you, my friend. Stay well. We need you, Stan.
I'm going to try.
That's my friend.
Thanks.
X Zone Nation, Stanton T. Friedman has been my guest this episode of the X Zone. He joined us via Skype from Fredericton, New Brunswick. His website, www.stantonfriedman.com. Well, that's it for tonight, and we'll keep on investigating the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology here in the X Zone. Online, you can find us at xzonetv.com, and you can listen to the X Zone radio show 724-365 at xzoneradiotv.com. So until next we meet, my friends, always remember to keep your eyes to the sky and your heart in the light. Good night, everyone. How would you like to be able to read other people's minds? Well, the next best thing is here. When you know how to read a person's name, you know how the person thinks, feels, and behaves. Each letter in our name holds a key to unlock our true essence. Our name contains both our gifts and challenges in this lifetime. Nemology science discovers personality secrets hidden in the placement of the letters of our names, including the first and last impression people remember about us. Sharon shows us how to interpret the arrangement of letters as outlined in her book, Know the Name, Know the Person. Sharon Lynn Wyeth created nemology science after 18 years of research and testing her theories, and has supported thousands of people around the world in understanding themselves and others better. You'll enjoy Sharon's unique teachings as she shares her system to learn the gifts behind your given birth name. Even if you don't like your birth name, there are jewels in this book. If you're thinking of changing your name, ready to name your child, or wanting to get along better with others, this is the book for you. If you'd like to improve your relationships and change your life for the better, get the book today, Know the Name, Know the Person, or visit www.knowthename.com. That's www.knowthename.com. What if Jesus came back now and insisted that we listen to him? How would the world be different if Christians really followed the Gospels? For 2,000 years we've been practicing a religion. Now it's finally time to get it right. Read Liberating Jesus, new from Roberta Grimes. Meet the Jesus you never knew. Roberta uses afterlife evidence and biblical analysis to prove that Jesus is exactly right. Learning the lessons that he came to teach is the reason we are born at all. Roberta says he has come back now to insist that we actually listen to him, so we can begin to use his teachings to unite and transform the world. Liberating Jesus wherever books are sold. Jesus has the answers, and it's not too late. Roberta blogs and answers questions at robertagrimes.com. Good real estate websites are not just about showing listings, but offering visitors valuable information about neighborhoods, market statistics, tips, and personal insights. Luckily, you will find that on Roost, but you won't on many other real estate websites in Budapest. That's why we created Roost. Roost is a website with tailored results for the foreign investor, curated by Hungarian-loving expats who found their home abroad and decided to roost in Budapest. Let Roost help you get started on the right foot. Whether you intend to live, work, play, retire, or simply invest abroad, Roost offers all types of properties in Budapest, from affordable studios to luxury homes. From neighborhood insights like where to grab a great coffee or how to buy property, our team of local experts can answer your questions and speak to the direct concerns of a foreign investor. Buying foreign property is an exciting and complex adventure. It can also be very time-consuming and costly if you don't have the best information and resources at hand. Roost provides professional real estate services and assistance to an international clientele of foreign property investors and rental apartment owners in Budapest. For more information on Roost, visit their website at www.roost.co. That's www.rooste.co.
Wouldn't you love to know the secret to everything? Well then, meet Dr. Kimberly McGeorge and her cutting-edge, breakthrough knowledge that combines science with possibility. Dr. Kimberly brings real-life answers and healing to those open to alternative solutions. She teaches solution-based programs and classes that will change all areas of your life forever. Specializing in conscious creation, intuitive readings, and energy medicine, you can rapidly shift health, relationships, business, and money and abundance challenges quickly. Receive her best-selling book, Secret to Everything, at no cost by going to secrettoeverything.com/X-Zone. That's right, transformation can start now. Just go to secrettoeverything.com/X-Zone and receive Dr. Kimberly's book for free.
How would you like to be able to read other people's minds? Well, the next best thing is here.
Wouldn't you love to know the secret to everything? Well then, meet Dr. Kimberly McGeorge and her cutting-edge, breakthrough knowledge that combines science with possibility. Dr. Kimberly brings real-life answers and healing to those open to
information about neighborhoods.
She teaches solution-based programs.